used to do, I don't do no more. Things I used to do, I don't do no more. Things I used to do, I don't do no more. For the Lord's made a change in me.
Technical record number 17. Zoom. The glitch we do not understand. So this is a new one that neither Nick nor I had encountered. We started the video recording. I'm introducing it. And then Nick spoke, and the camera, the zoom, went to him, and it never came back to me. It didn't split the screen, and it didn't go back and forth as it always does. So he'd never encountered it. I've never seen it. But there you go. Now, you're not missing much by not seeing me on camera, because you'll get a few seconds of me at the beginning, and you'll see my face is quite red. And that's because it was about 88 degrees in the house. And that's, I don't know, 32 for the rest of the world. And I think as the recording went on, I got progressively redder and sweatier, so you're not missing much. In the next room, I had the door shut, but in the next room, the AC guy was here working on the unit for the entire time of the recording. It's a 52-year-old air conditioner, and yesterday was the first really hot day of the season, and it didn't work. So there you go. I will try to add in a few visual elements, screenshots of this and that, so that it breaks up the recording a little bit. Not that there's anything objectionable about having the screen on Nick for the entire time, but well, I'll do that. And I thank you for listening. We had a great conversation about the book We, and I look forward to sharing it with you. Hello, this is Real History with Melissa, and today is the 27th of March, 2025, and I am on with Nick Hayes of Hayes Reviews, and we are talking about the novel We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, and we've had a little bit of an unrecorded preamble ramble where we've discussed how for 200 pages, this book turned out to be kind of intimidating in some ways. So we'll get going here. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Melissa. It's really good to be back doing these again. We've had a bit of a hiatus, and I owe an apology for that because it's been my busy life sort of getting in the way. But I'm really glad to be back and looking forward to talking about this book, which, as you just hinted and alluded to, for 200 pages really packs a wallop. And it's not a kind of Dostoevsky type epic with massive amounts of information, but it's kind of what isn't said and what's left out that leaves your brain ticking. So it should be a good conversation.
So no apology needed, because your delaying on the conversation turned out to be great for me, because I also have had to have a bit of a hiatus and doing different things with my aunt and helping her and just kind of regrouping and getting ready for Waiting for the Miracle and the Telegram Book Club. But I wanted to see if you had something that you wanted to share with the classroom. Anything you want to share today, Nick?
Absolutely, yeah. So we got a lovely bit of news earlier last year, which we managed to keep secretly. When I say we, I'm talking about myself and my wife, and people probably already figured out what it was, but we managed to keep it a secret right up until Christmas. And then we told our family that we were expecting a baby, and this baby is coming in June. And we're very excited. It's our first. We are preparing ourselves as best we can, although I have a feeling that no matter how much preparation we put into it, it's going to be totally an experience that we can't predict or prepare ourselves for. We're just going to have to live it. But we are very happy, and we're very much looking forward to welcoming this new person into our lives. And
That's
yeah, we're very looking forward to receiving all the wisdom that I think we're going to be witness to.
Oh, that is wonderful. I've already shared my biggest heartfelt congratulations, and you're embarking on this new adventure. I think it's just great.
I'm kind of sad that I won't have anywhere near as much time to read my books.
Oh, well, you never know. This might be a very quiet, easygoing little baby. So, there was something I was going to say too, and this has more to do when people talk about starting a family. Sometimes they go, "Oh, well, how are we going to afford it?" And I loved the saying that I have heard for years, which is "baby brings a loaf of bread." So somehow it all unfolds. And I would imagine maybe in your case is baby brings a bag of books. So
Let's
there's
see.
so I'm sure there's so many blessings involved as well as all of the, new responsibilities in that. So it's great. But we are talking about we. And the first thing that we'll say about the title is that in this world, which I think we've discovered is about 2600 AD, there really isn't anything like I or individuality. It's been stamped out. Anytime it starts to rear its ugly head, it is put down, and people have been trained in and programmed in a variety of ways to think of themselves collectively. So that hence the title. But we, as in Nick and I, or me and Nick, we are reading three different translations, and that has made it very interesting. And I will say that the first time through this, I read this translation that was done, I believe, in the 90s, like maybe 90 or 92, by Clarence Brown. And I have to say that comparing it to a couple of audiobook versions that I heard online and then doing a little bit of spot checking through this translation was done by Mira Ginsburg. And I read a little bit about her. She has an excellent reputation. She seems like a very thoughtful woman, and she had a lot of things that she said about her translation and so forth. But there were things when I did side by side comparisons to some of the things that Zamyatin wrote, and I'll never know because I don't read and write or speak Russian, but there were some colorful expressions that were just beyond. I mean, some of them were hilarious, and some of them were just like, oh my goodness, that is such good writing. What a visual he has painted there. And I really felt that Clarence Brown nailed him. I kept going back and comparing them and looking, and it's just, oh yeah, that's pretty great. So then when Nick and I got to finally kind of going back and forth, I said, so D503, that's the narrator. D503 is the one who's telling the story on these entries into a journal, or what he calls records. And I said something about D503, and Nick said, oh, well, in my translation, he is not D503. He is just represented by a triangle, the pictograph, the image of a triangle. So I think we'll discover as we talk that there are some uh, big differences in our translations, but we're diving in now. So, what did you think?
Yeah, great points. So I wasn't so well prepared as to read from two different translations, but I'm glad you did. And the one that I read from, I'll get up on the camera here and show people, was
Ah,
Hugh Aplin's translation. And this is the Alma Classics. And there's a front cover, which is actually pretty nifty.
it
It's very
is.
pointy and spiky, um and yeah, in the introduction, he starts talking about the characters' names. And it's worth quoting because he goes into a little bit of an analysis and explanation as to why he used the symbols which he did. And so hopefully people can see there. I can even zoom in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we've got a I, S, and R are from the Latin. He's talking about the different alphabets that the author pulled from. So there's three letters that are from Latin, and then there's three from Cyrillic. And I don't know how D, F, and U, he said in brackets. And then there's also Greek. So there's the triangle, which is the narrator, which is delta. So I think
Hmm.
that's why he's D503 in other translations, and then phi, and then the final letter used is O, which is common to all three alphabets. And what's really interesting is a lot of these are combinations of a line and an O. So you can see I, the phi symbol is made up of an I and an O. There's another character whose name begins with I. There's another character whose name begins with O. There's another character whose name is this kind of linked I-O version here. So that comes up again and again and again. And he goes through in his introduction giving further explanations as to why he thinks these names have been chosen. And it is very interesting. It made a lot more sense after I'd read the book to go back and check this out. But for example, we'll we'll hear a lot about this character I-330. And he talks about how this character I-330 potentially has the number 330 because threes sort of look like breasts on the side, and that this character is meant to be seductive and alluring and a bit of a vixen is I think the word you used to describe her. And there's another character called O90, and she is kind of short and plump and round and childish. And so there's definitely something in the names. They're not accidental, and quite a lot apparently has been written about why they've been chosen.
There's something else too that he said about, oh, we'll get into the relationships between them all. But when he's describing O, he talks about her roundness, including having kind of like puffy fat wrists and so forth. And he describes her as being 10 centimeters shorter than the maternal norm. So for breeding purposes, there's a norm and she's missed it. She's not tall enough.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a great example of what this book's like all the way through, which is these matter of fact statements of the way things are in the world of we, which you can miss them so easily because they're not a big thing to the narrator. They're the everyday common things. So he just mentions it, a little phrase here, and you can quite easily skip past it. But a lot of these things are you sort of do a double take. You're like, what? Like that one that you just mentioned is like there's a maternal norm. There's another part in the book where he talks about there's a certain number of times you have to chew each mouthful of food, which has been worked out by law. And I think it's 50 or 30 or something like that, which actually is pretty good advice. The better you chew your food, the easier it is on your digestive system. And, there's something to that. But down to how many times they chew each mouthful of food and also the best height to be a mother. It's regulated, it's measured, it is justified, it is all calculated, and that is the world of we, where there is nothing left to chance or intuition or emotion or anything ambiguous. Everything is planned, measured, and prescribed.
I'm wondering if you think it's a good idea for me to take a stab at just summarizing the world that we find ourselves in at the very beginning. Just a couple of highlights, and then I'll
Yeah.
turn it over to you. So we live in one state, and one state is altogether, it's one with no space in between it, the capital S state. So one state is where we live. We are run by a benefactor, the benefactor. He is like Big Brother. And every year, on the day of unanimity, they vote unanimously for the benefactor. And that happens year after year. We find ourselves in the future, like I believe I saw that it was 2600 AD. And we know that this world, which everything is efficient and has been worked out very specifically, is the result of something that came to be after the 200 Years' War. And we live in a city that is surrounded by the Green Wall. That is it. And everything in our city is glass. Our apartments are just glass. Our furniture is glass. Everything is transparent. The only privacy that we have in this world is when we get our tickets, which are mandated. You've gone to meet with people, they've determined your biology, your aptitude, et cetera, and within a certain range of numbers, and we are all called numbers. We're not people, we're numbers. You are then allowed to select within certain parameters the numbers that you want to have sex with. And it would appear that those, like different than Brave New World, you get 2 or maybe 3 numbers that you have sex with on a rotating basis. So your only privacy in this world is when you can lower your blinds for your allotted time to have sex. And I think it's a half-hour window. That was the sense that I got. If I missed that, sorry. But that's about it. So you've got that. So people get to the point for that. And there is another thing that our narrator kind of bemoans is that every moment of every day is not quite yet perfected. There still have to give people an hour of personal time. I think it might be once a week, but that haven't quite figured out how to make it all just scientifically perfected, but they're almost there. And then we have so the benefactor is at the top, and then we have the guardians. And the guardians, they just look like jackbooted, but that's how I imagine them. They wear black and they enforce. And let's see, what else is there here? Everybody's a number or a symbol. So our narrator is D503, or a triangle. His woman that he seems to be the most ticketed with the most often is 090. And I don't have jotted down, he is in a triangle. He describes it as almost like a family with the African. He's a black man, and they're all friends. They do a lot of math together. People like to solve math problems in this world. Here it is. The triangle is our narrator, D503, the African man, R13, and 090, who's shorter than the maternal norm. So 090 is also ticketed with R13, the African. So she's having sex with both of them, not at the same time. But and D503 and R13 are good friends because they went to school together. So they have reminiscences about studying in school. And the other little piece of information that we the 2 more things here I'll mention. So it's surrounded by the green wall. Everything is glass. And what he describes, he does not use the word panopticon, but there is a place in the book where he describes the way that the setup is to help the guardians observe them. So obviously they're living in a panopticon setup. And the other thing that we should know is that D503 is a builder. I think it just calls him a builder, and it doesn't describe him as an architect or a designer or an engineer, but he is the builder of the integral, which is some sort of craft that the way they describe what the integral is going to do and where it's going to go, it's some kind of spacecraft. That's what we know. So I think that sets up the world for us. If there's something that you want to add, jump in. Otherwise, take it away.
You set up the world really well. And I think the best the only thing to add really is a couple of quotes, maybe from the early parts of the book, which when I went back for a skim and refresh myself, this book's actually really funny. There are
It's
laugh out
very
loud
funny. Yeah.
moments in it. And at the same, and it's got other layers to it as well. It's kind of disorienting, the way action unfolds, the way the narrator experiences what his sort of character arc, his development that he goes through, which is we'll talk a little bit more about. Um, but so maybe I can dig up a couple of quotes here just to give people a flavor of what this world is like. So this is the second record, and I put in the notes here, Spock or Data from Star Trek is probably the way you want to imagine this narrator and the way he speaks. And he says, quote, "It's spring. From beyond the Great Wall, from the savage invisible plains, the wind carries the yellow honeyed dust of some kind of flowers." And then he talks about the sky. Oh yeah, he talks about this pollen from the flowers making lips sweet. Everyone you encounter must have sweet lips. And then he says, "This is something of a hindrance to logical thinking." So considering lips and their being sweet is hindering his logical thinking. But this bit is really good about the sky. He says, "But then the sky, blue, not spoilt by a single cloud. How savage were the tastes of the ancients if their poets could be inspired by those absurd, sloppy, stupidly jostling heaps of vapor. I like, I'm sure I won't be mistaken if I say we like only such sterile, irreproachable sky as this. On days like this, the whole world is cast of that same unshakable, eternal glass as the green wall, as all of our constructions." So this is a really great example of a sky, blue, pure, clean, nothing in it. This is order. This is pure, perfect order. It's sanitized, and there's no blemish on the sky. And you can see that absurd, sloppy, and stupidly jostling heaps of vapor is the description of what a cloud might look like. And then the green wall, which you mentioned in the intro there, reminded me of the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz, which came out in 1900. And this book, we should mention, came out in, was it 1921 or 23, something like that?
He wrote it in, most people agree that he actually finished writing it in late 21, but it was not translated. It wasn't translated into Russian until 1988. And it wasn't translated into English until, I believe, 1924. So, but the book itself,
Okay.
yes, written in 1921.
And then published first in English, right? Because
Hmm.
it was too risky for him to publish in his native
Yes.
language. And then it was only in the 80s when he got it published in Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was evidently some kind of bastardization in the Russian language where they used a Czech translation that had come from the French, and it was a kind of way of pretending back in the 50s that, oh, look, we used a Czech thing to turn it into Russian, but all of the translators agreed this is not Russian. This does not count as a Russian translation. So,
Right. Back to the intro. This is the first page, the first record, and and it gives you the context of this document because it's not just a straight narrative, like some omniscient narrator telling you a story who's not present. This is a diary, but it's written for a specific purpose. And he tells us on the first page about the integral, which in my copy it says he's the constructor of the integral, and he talks about himself as a mathematician. And he gives you the history. So he says, the great historic, so in 120 days, the great historic hour when the first integral will soar up into outer space is nigh. So, first page, they're thinking about space travel. He's writing
mhm,
about space travel. It's pretty amazing,
mhm,
thinking about when it was written. A
mhm.
1,000 years ago, your heroic ancestors subjugated the entire globe to the power of the one state. And this is him quoting from the State Gazette, the newspaper. Um, It says, "A feat more glorious falls to you, to integrate by means of the glass electric fire breathing integral the endless equation of the universe. it falls to you to subordinate to the beneficent yoke of reason the unknown beings living on other planets, possibly still in the savage state of freedom.
I
If they do
think
not understand that we bring them mathematically infallible happiness, it is our duty to force them to be happy. But before arms, we try the word. And so, so arms, before the stick, we'll try and convince them. And so
propaganda.
they're sending, yeah. And so they're sending with this ship uh, poems, uh, treatises, manifestos, odes, and other works on the beauty and greatness of the one state. So our narrator decides to keep a blow by blow record of the things that happened to him, and this is going to go in the integral as his contribution to propagandizing aliens. So that's the context of why he's writing this, and it comes in a form of a diary, and there's record. He calls them records. I think there's 40 records altogether,
Mhm.
and each one has this conspectus with a few key words, sort of outlining what happens in that particular entry. Do you want to take it
Uh,
over from here?
That's interesting that your translation that does not compress one state into one word. That's interesting because both of my translations did put them together. There's something else. If you flip back to that page right there and stay there, I'll just use your copy to read from. But I just wanted to talk about art and some of the things that popped out for me about art during reading this. The music, and this unfolds as we get introduced to the vixen, I-330 down the road. She plays the piano, and he describes it as an old, antique that the Savages played, or back in the day when they had a grand piano. And she can play that, and we don't know what she's playing. Maybe it's Tchaikovsky or, I mean, but whatever it is, it's very emotional and intense. And he said, not at all like our music. And then he describes the mathematical precision of what they call music. And I think that the way that he's describing it would make Bach seem jazzy and romantic, and so. But that's one example, and another is the poems. His friend in the triangle, the African, is a poet, but what they do is not really poetry. It's putting things to rhyme. Like I think it was a court case verdict that the African had to put to rhyme. And you get the sense that the epic poems that they're talking about here are just another form of like jingles, or almost like little memes that rhyme, that are put out. And so an epic one might be longer, but it's definitely nothing like what we think of as an epic poem. And at a certain point in the book, he mentions the messiness of love and emotion. There are two great uh, things that they're at war with in this world. One of them they've conquered, and that's hunger. And we discover that the food that they eat is petroleum based. And the second thing that they haven't quite conquered is love. So when he's talking about love and the messiness of emotions and everything, he brings up the poet Pushkin. And Pushkin would be, maybe still is considered the greatest Russian writer, the greatest Russian poet for sure. And in the Romantic era, who met his demise in his 30s, I believe, when he called out to duel someone that his wife was flirting with. So this is the real Russian poet. And so, Zamyatin would know that. And Zamyatin also came from nobility. His first language was not Russian, it was French. He was trained, raised the way probably a lot of noble people were, with French as the first language. And so that adds an interesting element to try to get inside the writer's mind. But it's just funny because the messy emotions that you saw a romantic writer get into, like Pushkin. This was just anathema to this world. Everything. And then there was one other little thing about art and music that I wanted to mention. He's talking about the primitive people before the 200-year war, and that surely they understood the transformative nature of music because after all, some of them did, get involved in marching band and marching music. So this is his one nod of approval to the past is that they had marching music. So it couldn't be all bad.
It's really interesting. You mentioned the biographical details of Zamyatin. I hadn't looked into it that much, apart from what I read in the intro by Hugh Applin. But this line that stood out to me, which says, Zamyatin was a heretic himself and suffered arrest and persecution for it under both the Tsarist and the communist regimes.
Yeah.
That stood out to me. I'm like, okay, he wasn't he wasn't liked by either of those.
I'm going to
So he
pull
certainly
up
was.
I'll pull up just a little bit here. I pulled up his wiki, and it describes him as a Russian author of science fiction, philosophy, literary criticism, and political satire. He was the son of a Russian Orthodox priest. He lost his faith in Christianity at an early age and became Bolshevik. French may not have been his first language. That might have been Pushkin that I was thinking about, but he had an outstanding education, lost his faith in Christianity, and became a Bolshevik as a young man. And then it said he was a member of his party's pre-revolutionary underground, was repeatedly arrested, beaten, imprisoned, and exiled. And so he developed deep disturbance, a deep concern about what the Bolsheviks were doing, and he hated the conformity and increasing totalitarianism that he was seeing. This There's one interesting thing too about the novel is that repeatedly it seems that everyone agrees. I'm not sure I do, but the translators, critics, and so forth all agree that there's something that's not really Russian about it. Zamyatin himself had something to do with ship port. I don't want to say building. He wasn't a shipbuilder himself, but there was some kind of connection to ships and ports. And he spent some time in England, 2 or 3 years. And he was described as being a bit of a dandy. He died in Paris, in exile, and he had very high aesthetic attitudes, many of which it's assumed he picked up at his time in England and the time that he spent in various exile periods in France. But they all agree that he's writing about something more universal. There's no bad guy, there's no capitalist bad guy, there's no USA bad guy, there's no, even the Bolsheviks themselves don't seem to be characterized as bad guys. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a kind of a that's a consensus, is that this was a universal book and less about Russia than just about totalitarianism in general.
Yeah, interesting. But I mean, well, the parallels are striking with other books that deal with similar topics, right? Like 1984 and Brave New World. And the more I think about it, the parallels with Brave New World are, I don't know, it's got elements of both, or at least it combines both. But it follows a very similar structure to Brave New World, the narrative, because the narrator, he's sort of blissfully unaware, and then his world gets rocked, and then he discovers a group of wild people, and then he has a face-to-face with the top dog, in Brave New World, it's Mustafa Mond, and then there's a face-to-face meeting with the benefactor at the end of this book, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a very similar now, but then there's it is literally like a marriage between 1984 and Brave New World because there's elements of
Mhm.
1984 in there as well, narrative elements, particularly the ending, uh, to certain phrases. I was just scanning through earlier and I found a reference to a boot,
Mhm.
and the famous Orwell quote about
Mhm.
the boot stomping on the face for eternity. So, so yeah, I don't know. I can't speak. My knowledge of history is not so good that I could tell. Um, for example, Orwell's Animal Farm, clear parallels with the Russian Revolution,
Hmm.
and like characters represent real historical people. But I'd say I didn't see that in this. I could understand taking that position that it's more of a uh, depiction of totalitarianism, a broader, more general,
Hmm.
universal sense. But
Hmm.
I'm also not so well educated on the whole thing to be able to pick out what he might be alluding to and referring to.
I mean, I think you're right. I think the consensus probably is right. There were a few points, specifically about the idea of revolution that I felt was pure Trotsky, especially coming from the mouth of I 330. But otherwise, I think the consensus is true. It's we don't. I didn't pick up on specific historical events or characters.
So let me go back quickly to just to revisit something we already touched on, which was the music. The first, so I put I don't know if I showed, but I put a bunch of post-it notes and the sticky notes, just
Yes, you
things that
did.
stood out to me, things I wanted to mention and go back to. And the very first one I put in was AI music
Mm,
because I was blown away that he'd described and written about a machine that creates music back when he wrote this. And now we're
mhm,
living, and we've talked about
yes.
AI music in this series before
Hmm.
in another video, haven't we? And so he talks about, but it's hilarious. So he's talking about this invention, the musicometer, and somebody's giving a speech. I think it's perhaps their monthly or yeah, he's in the auditorium and they all get together and they all the news is announced and they sing the hymn of the one state. Um, and they get and then somebody starts a speech, respected numbers, because everybody here gets referred to as a number, not as a man or a woman, right? And so somebody's giving a speech describing the musicometer. Simply by turning this handle here, any one of you can produce up to 3 sonatas an hour. Whereas with what difficulty did that come to your ancestors? They were able to create only when they had driven themselves to fits of inspiration, quote unquote, an unknown form of epilepsy.
That
And
made
here
me
you have a
laugh.
most amusing illustration of what they achieved, the music of Scriabin, the 20th century, this black box. Yeah, and I'm like, that blew I was like, that's gonna have to
Yeah.
go on a sticky note. AI music, three
Yeah.
sonatas an hour. I think we've surpassed that, you know. I think
Yeah.
we could probably pump out more than that an hour these days with the software we've got, but amazing foresight.
Yeah, absolutely. A good one.
And it doesn't stop there. There's a bit much later in the book. Uh, yeah. Oh, I gotta find it nice and easily. Electric toothbrushes. That blew my mind as well. I'm like, surely they didn't have electric toothbrushes back then, and now, we've all got them.
Hmm.
And I've always found something a bit creepy about electric toothbrushes. I don't know what it is. I don't see what the problem is with manual ones. I don't know how much better the electric ones are. I used to live with a bunch of dentists, and they were like, "Oh, the electric ones are really a lot better," but I think they were just like getting free handouts at the university where they
They
were
kick,
studying.
yeah. For every electric toothbrush that you sell,
Yeah, something like that.
it's a
Um,
1,000 pounds towards your education.
It's well, £1,000 off your debt, your
Yeah.
student debt. Yeah. So a lot of and there's other bits in here. I mean, in fact I'll just kind of do a whip through of all the uh, technological things that he foreshadowed. One of them is weather modification. It wasn't explicitly described, but it was kind of alluded to. I think it was alluded to. So on this bit here is I put weather control. Um, he talks about accumulator towers were not, so he's talking about a time in the past when accumulator towers were not yet known, when the untamed sky still raged from time to time with quote unquote thunderstorms. So they've got weather modification down in
Yes.
this time as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
There's another part in the book where they talk about wave tidal power, and he's saying, "Oh, these savages in the past, sorry, these savages in the past, they just had all this. They just watched the waves crashing on the shore, and they didn't know how to harness that energy.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I was just the it blew my mind, the technology that he saw
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
hundred years ahead of time. It
Hmm.
really did.
Yeah, there was somebody that made the comments. I don't remember if it was Clarence Brown, the translator, or someone else who said, so he would have had the benefit of seeing all of, English life at that era and the whole ship industry and so forth, but he would have been well exposed to the works of H.G. Wells. And that's probably true. That, I don't know how they sussed that out, but that's probably true. So he might have gotten some of his future gadgets from H.G. Wells, but if it's true, he
Yeah.
didn't acknowledge it. Oh, this is a total jump back um, into territory that we've already covered. But I just wanted to give an example of what I think is just great writing. Um, the, he's so colorful, and that's why you get the laughs that you do. But his writing, it's just colorful. It's funny. It shows a real sense of a real ability to observe, and it's just funny. So, so I-33 comes onto the scene. This is in record number two. So right off the bat, she's introduced, and she is a hottie, as they used to say. She's tall, she's lean, she is probably really sexy. She's got a huge mouthful of teeth. Um, there's a shadow on her chest. So he describes it as a shadow. So, it must be cleavage. So she's good looking, and 090 is round and soft and has a lot of baby fat on her and so forth. So I-330 comes in, and there's some kind of a tension, and 090 picks up on it immediately. And she said, "He's assigned to me." Her mouth smiling rosily, said 090. And our narrator said, "It would have been better if she'd not said anything, of course. That was completely beside the point. Besides, that's dear O. How should I put this? Her tongue isn't set at the right speed. The MPs, that's motions per second of the tongue, must always be a little less than the MPS of thought, and never the other way round." And I just thought that was hilarious. Her tongue is not set at the right speed. She and there's that kind of writing all through the book where you laugh, or you're just, there's some places where I literally went, "Ah, I can't, that writing is just so great."
I'm looking for an example now as well, where I think it's when she comes to meet him to go out for the walk. And I think she comes to his flat. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Here it is. This bit gave me a chuckle as well. So this is in um, the same episode. They go out for a walk during their allotted free time hour or whatever it is, where they all have to go marching around the streets in lines, rows of four. And this is where he meets I-330, who becomes the sort of the love interest, I suppose, and that's what shakes him from his uh, sort of unshakable comfort in the one state and belief in the triumph of reason, because he starts to have feelings, these feelings start coming up, and the whole plot, a lot of it revolves around him battling with these feelings and kind of like, no, these aren't logical, and what's going on inside me, and he kind of goes into this almost schizophrenic episode with trying to resolve the logic and the order of the one state and his undying devotion to the benefactor with this fascination, this attraction, this allure of I-330. But here, just in this bit, this to go back to how he describes O. Um, so she shows up. He says she'll be here in half a minute to fetch me for a walk. There's an annunciator which gives a click, which tells him that it's time to go for a walk, and he knows that 090 will be there. And
Does
this is
this
where it says 10 centimeters or shorter than the maternal norm.
does the
Sorry, what are you gonna say?
annunciator remind you of an Apple Watch and a Fitbit kind of thing? Oh, you haven't taken enough steps today.
Yeah, yeah, a nudge, just that little
Yeah.
nudge, tell you what to do next. So yeah, he's here. He says 10 centimeters or so shorter than the maternal norm. But he says here, when she came in, the logical flywheel was still really humming away inside me. And through force of inertia, I started talking about the formula I had just established, which included all of us and the machinery and the dance. So he's really excited about this. It's wonderful, isn't it? I asked. Yes, wonderful. It's spring. Oh, 90 smiled at me pinkly. Well, there, if you please. Spring. She's on about spring. Women. I fell silent. This is funny because I was saying before we hit record how this is our first spring in the house where we're living now, and we've got a garden and it's coming to life. And I don't know anything about plants and how to look after them and which ones do what at what time of the year. But all these colors are coming up, and we got yellows and purples, and we got pink, and it's amazing to
And you
just
have a
not.
cherry tree, you told me, which
And a
is,
cherry blossom, yeah,
yeah.
big cherry blossom that's now shedding its blossoms, and it's kind of snowing in the back. So spring's amazing. I could stand in the garden, and I have been standing in the garden, just looking at it and just feeling so blessed and lucky to have that around me. It's an amazing time of year, but so it just made me laugh. Spring. She's on about spring. Women, because it's not interesting to him because he wants to know about things that can be mathematically quantified, things that can be measured, things that are equal and balanced and rational.
Mhm.
And so he doesn't, nothing appeals to him about something like nature or a beautiful sunset or a cloud or any of this kind of thing. So it just gives you an insight into where he begins the story, because and then the story unfolds as with a gradual breakdown of um, this total, I don't know what the quite the right word is for it, like allegiance or worship of what is logical and quantifiable.
Mhm.
Like as I mentioned, the feelings start to break through, and then there's hilarious interactions later on with people who may or may not be part of the revolution, which is kind of a
Mhm.
big part of the plot as well that we haven't mentioned yet, but we sort of alluded to. Um, so he meets I-330, and something about her really grabs his attention, and she tells him to meet her at a certain place, and he says, "Well, if I get an order, I will." Um, and she says, "You will get the order."
Mhm.
And this is kind of the first hint that there's some sort of resistance, there's some sort of underground rebellion taking place,
Mhm.
and the things might not all be locked down and organized and coordinated as they seem. And then a large part of the story then is about the narrator being gradually brought into this world. And I think one of the big mysteries about the novel that isn't clear, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is kind of what the well that they do come clear at the end. Actually, I'm kind of forgetting this, but you don't know until you get to the end. Is what are what is the intention of I-330 towards the narrator, and what is their relationship? So when you were reading it, what were kind of your impressions? Where did you think the story was going?
I think like you just pointed out early on, you get the sense that there is some kind of an organized resistance. And I I mean, I'll give the story away if I answer that question, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah,
we
that's
can
true.
give the story away, but I have to say that I never trusted her. That's just, I'll put it like that. I never trusted her. Um, and there's something that our narrator, I mentioned to you before we started recording that there's something that although I read it twice and listened to it twice, and or the style of writing is elliptical. There are things not said. There are lots of things not said and left out. It's a very simple story, and it only takes 200 pages to write it, but you're filling in some blanks and you're figuring things out because of the way he's doing it. Our narrator is having a kind of a mental breakdown, and these records are being produced by him supposedly for the Integral, the ship Integral, and their voyage into space. But it's really some kind of form of therapy for him or catharsis. And he's losing it because his mind has ceased to work in a pure reason, rational, logical, mathematical way. And he doesn't know what to make of it. And you get the you just have to stop and start with him constantly because he's processing feelings. He doesn't even know what a feeling is, you know. So he's processing something that's completely alien, and you stop. Now you add to this that in comes the vixen. And what there are two things that are interesting that I wanted to comment. The first is he does not respond to her like a man nowadays would respond to an obviously good looking woman that has certain charms. None of that, because they don't even think that way. You get your sex ticket with who you get your sex ticket with, and you do sometimes you have sex and sometimes you work on math problems together. And it's devoid of ownership, or there's no "you're mine" or any of that. And in fact, they stress that in here, that so that is all gone. And so for him to meet someone that he doesn't look at her and go, well, she's really attractive, because they don't think like that. So something is to work on him, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, that he can't comprehend. Then you add to that the fact that she has an agenda. She's part of a revolutionary underground movement. She's got an agenda, and she's teasing him. She's using her obvious sexual physical charms to get to him, and then she's just feeding him little bits of information to see how he responds, to see if he's going to play along, to see if she can manipulate him, to see what's happening. And so all of that comes through in the writing. And so as the reader, you're going like this all the time, you're just jerking back and forth going, what, did I miss something? I'm look at that again. And so that's part of the frustration of it. But from the get-go, my female sense said this woman has got an agenda here that's not pure.
Mm.
it's I'm not going to call it love.
And I'll just show this quote as well, because you mentioned no ownership, and I had that written down in the margin here. He's talking about this again from the second record. He's on the walk with 090, and he says, "To my left, 090. Writing this 1,000 years or so ago, my one of my hairy ancestors probably would have referred to her with that ridiculous word, my."
Mhm.
So that's a really good insight. Yeah, they don't have the ownership. And then there's another bit here, which is all about sex, the regulation of sex, the reproduction, the control of it. He says, "Isn't it absurd that a state, it dared to call itself a state, could leave sexual life without any sort of control?" And they're talking about the past and the way things used to be. Isn't it ridiculous to know plant breeding, poultry breeding, fish breeding? We have precise data that they knew all this, and not to be able to reach the final rung of that logical ladder, child breeding. So when his sort of biological nature starts to take over, when he starts to feel all these feelings and he doesn't know how to put them into words and he's battling with himself because they don't fit into his worldview. That's what lends that disorientation and the difficulty to that we experience as a reader trying to follow along with
Mhm.
this experience he's having. But to speak to your distrust of I-330, uh, he does the first thing he focuses on is her mouthful of sharp white teeth, which is predatory, isn't it? That's
Yes.
the thing, and he mentions it over and over again all the way through.
Yeah.
Um, and here, and actually, I just saw the word predatory again in my sort of annotations. And here he says the dazzling, almost cruel teeth.
Hmm.
He's talking about how she looks. She's got a tight-fitting black dress, so she's the seductress, but that sharply emphasizes the whiteness of her shoulders and chest. And there you are, the warm shadow that heaved with her breathing between, and the dazzling, cruel teeth.
Hmm.
So she is uh, depicted as predatory, as manipulative, and and reflecting on that and hearing you describe it is kind of now making this novel seem more and more kind of like I don't know if it would be not a making the narrator seem like more of a kind of a goofy, just in over his head type of character that you might find in a comedy film, where, just a well-meaning sort of basically good-natured ne'er-do-well finds himself in over his head by and is kind of just dragged along for the ride, not really knowing what's going on. I don't know if I explained that properly. I'm trying to think of an example that I can liken it to, but does that make sense? What I'm
It
trying to.
it does make sense. I mean, again, I know that some of you, like Neil Foster told me that he read the novel and was looking forward to the conversation. And I know there are a few people who have actually read it or were reading along with us. And then some people might be inspired to pick up the book. So, spoiler alert, if you have not read it, I am just going to say a couple of things here. And then we can go back to, back in records. But to sum it up, I feel that if this story has a heroine, a victor, a true human, it is 090. And
Yes.
then I believe that an 090 is our childish, child fat, 10 centimeters shorter than maternal norm. To me, she's the heroine of the book. The narrator, D503, the triangle, he never quite makes it, but he has a couple of inclinations towards humanity that I'm not even, they probably took him by surprise, but there's a couple of inclinations there that make you go, okay, he tried. And I think of the revolutionary, the vixen, which is I-330. I don't want to call her the villain. I don't, but when I finished reading the novel and I contemplated the characters and I really thought about her, I kept hearing Alan Watt in my head. And I kept hearing him say, "You cannot fight the system by using the system." And he would say that over and over in so many different ways. And so revolution is using the system to fight the system, and revolutionaries use the system to fight the system. And everything that she represents is using the system to try to overthrow the system. So there's no genuine organic humanity in her. And so here's the spoiler alert. When she meets her demise at the end, it seems to me justified. And when 090 is able to escape to the other side of the green wall, you feel really good about it because she's shown us some truly human qualities. That's how I see it. That's how I see our characters.
I
So,
agree with everything you've just said.
okay. Well, backing up just a little bit, and then we can fill in the blanks here. At record 8, there was just something I said the African who was part of. It's an interesting thing because you can see 090 has a lot of truly. She's 10 centimeters shorter than the maternal norm, but she is a woman. She's got a maternal instinct. She is possessive and jealous of her ticketed lover, and she wants nothing more than to be a mother. This is the most amazing thing. And when it is revealed to her, and we'll fill in the blanks of that story later, that what she's doing by getting pregnant will surely end in her death. She said, I don't care. Just to feel that inside of me for that brief period of time is enough for me. And if you compare that to all of the women who are, my body, my rights, and the maternal instinct being drummed out of women increasingly over time, to me, she's just a heroine. She's a real woman. She's got humanity. She's got jealousy. She's got love. She's got maternal instincts. She's just, she may be short, but she's she's it for me.
That's a really good point as well, because with the narrative of a rebellion, of a revolution, and because it's such an oppressive panopticon type of society, my inclination is to side with the rebels. I
Hmm.
watch too much Star Wars.
Hmm.
So I want to be like, yeah, let's see this thing get toppled, let's see this regime get
Yes.
kicked off the top of the pyramid. And so it's a really kind of bold move to have the leader, or at least what looks to be the leader from the narrator's point of view, is she's probably the highest up that he comes into contact with. Um, to really be this predatory, manipulative,
Hmm.
ends justify the means
Hmm.
type of character who's very cutthroat and doesn't mind sort of playing with the narrator, looking
Hmm.
down at him, teasing him, and being and just wrapping him around her little
Hmm.
finger and
Hmm.
knowingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting.
She even says, "Oh, I was just testing you to see if you'll do everything I want you to do." I mean, she's obviously manipulating him and using him well, I mean, it doesn't start off obvious, but it gets increasingly obvious that she is using him for her own ends. And I thought of Alan, you can't use the system. And that means all of the behaviors, the predatory, psychopathic, narcissistic, whatever they are, your dark triad or your political left, right, you cannot use that to overcome this, is to embrace true humanity. And I don't think there's anything more human than love and the reproductive gift that we are given, that we can do. We can create a life. That's the ultimate revolution right there. But I don't
Well,
know.
it's the one that in this society they will execute you for.
Yes.
Um, as well, and there's other things you can get executed for, right? He mentions at one point that poisoning yourself with nicotine and alcohol
Yes.
can also get you executed. And so they've got it locked down. It doesn't mention how and when and who gets to reproduce. That's kind of never explicitly mentioned, I don't
Mhm.
think. Did you pick up?
I didn't think
Uh,
so either. The only thing that he mentions explicitly, they don't even talk about the way um, that children are created, but you get a sense by what you're told that certain people are deemed um, quality enough. They're the right height, the right look, the right IQ, whatever, that they can be breeders, and that nobody else, on pain of death, um, can reproduce. And there's some elements. The only thing he explicitly tells us, there's an actual child rearing factory, but by that I interpreted that to mean once the baby is born, it is taken from whoever bred it and put in this factory where it's given its indoctrination, its education, and so forth. But I didn't get a test tube baby kind of thing going on like you do in Brave New World. But yeah, that seems to be that was my takeaway. You know,
Yeah.
you're deemed. The other thing too is that remember how in Brave New World you've got those belts. What were they called? That had the birth control on them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
just remember zippy comicnics. That's
Yeah,
the only word I can remember now. But I'm not sure if that's what the belts
yeah.
or if that's the
The
underwear.
belt had a name. I think the zippy was the actual outfit that you could get out of really quickly. But anyway, the belt in Brave New World had the actual birth control pocket or pouch or whatever. So you were always carrying around. It was part of it. And the belts had different things that they were made of. So I think one of them was like mock leather. That was one of the highest ones that you could get. But the part of the woman's outfit was to be carrying her own birth control with her. Well, here you don't get that, but you have to assume that all of the women know when they're going to be fertile, that they have that much of an education and awareness. They know that they've got their tickets to have sex, and it seems to be just a given that they know how not to get pregnant.
Well, also, 090 says at the beginning to D503, oh, I wish I could come to your flat tonight. And he says kind of like silly woman. She knows we can't be together for another 2 nights, you know? So that they have a schedule of
Uh-huh.
when they can meet and
Yep.
lower the blinds
Hmm.
as dictated by the tickets, and perhaps baked into that schedule is the days where it's safe to do so. Safe meaning
Hmm.
lower zero chance of actually conceiving. But also I wanted to mention and to circle back a little bit to this discussion of humanity, and what makes us human, which and one of the big topics later in the book is imagination. And one of the sticky notes that I put in the book here is science cures imagination.
Hmm.
And this is a really key sort of, it's more towards the end in kind of the climax of the book. Um, and it's this thing here called The Great Operation.
Which record was
And
that?
this is the 31st record.
Okay. All right.
And there's another
Yes.
quote from the State Gazette. I guess that's the only paper in town. And the State Gazette says, and it's announcement. It says, rejoice, for henceforth you are perfect. Until today, your own creations, machinery were more perfect than you. In what way? Every spark of a dynamo is a spark of the purest reason. Every stroke of a piston is an immaculate syllogism. But is that same infallible reason not within you too? The philosophy of cranes, presses, and pumps is complete and clear, like the circle made by a pair of compasses. But is your philosophy any less like the compasses? The beauty of machinery lies in the rhythm, undeviating and precise like a pendulum. But have you, reared from childhood on the Taylor system, not become pendularly precise? And there is only the one thing. Machinery has no imagination. And then basically it goes on to say, it's not your fault that you have imagination. You are ill. The name of this illness is imagination. And then the
I'm glad you
announcement.
read that. Yeah.
The latest discovery of state science, the center of imagination, is a pitiful little cerebral node in the region of bridge of Varolio. Triple cauterization of this node with X-rays, and you are cured of imagination forever. Isn't that great, everybody? They
Uh-huh.
cured imagination. And so this thing of removing people's humanity, imagination, that not only can we physically, biologically reproduce and create life, but we also have that capacity for creation within our minds and our imagination to make everything that I'm looking at right now was all created by the human imagination, the camera and the laptop and the desk and the radiator and the blinds and the lamp and all these things around me all started in here in the imagination. Somebody thought, oh, you know what? It'd be nice if we had a sort of portable light that you could move around and point at different things in a room. It wasn't fixed to the wall, right? And then you went and made that. And so getting rid of imagination, that's a really key part, and I think ties in quite nicely with I know Alan Watts' um, thinking as well about what is to be done. It's going to involve imagination. It's not going to involve being predatory and psychopathic and using the system because the system is self-preserving.
Mhm.
And that connects to down here where it says the Taylor system. Taylor being, was it Frederick Winslow Taylor,
Mhm.
the industrialist who had the quote about how in the past man was the foremost, and in the future the system is going to be most important. And this, I think, I watched a few summaries and reviews of the book on YouTube, and none
Mhm.
of them mentioned how this is a Taylorist. This is a society built on Taylorism. He says
Mhm.
it in the book, and that is actually what we are heading into. Not we, the book people, the human beings on this call and listening to this, we're going into this AI Taylor system. James Corbett put out a fantastic video just a day or two ago called Algocracy. And this is an
Mhm.
hour-long podcast about the algorithmocracy and how
Interesting.
you've got Trump and surrounded by the technocrats and the way that they're utilizing AI and embedding it into all these different levels and layers of society and all these different systems, and
Uh-huh.
they're cutting jobs and replacing it with all this efficient,
Mhm.
machine reasoned, logical, fact-based software.
Mhm.
And so that just adds another layer of poignancy and power to the book and to Zamyatin's foresight of what he either, I don't know if he saw it coming or if he just happened to channel something through from the other side about where it was all going. Who knows how these things kind of work, but worth mentioning. And it's one aspect that I think gets overlooked by a lot of the commentators that I listen to.
Well, Alan he often mentioned time and motion studies, and and this because efficiency, time and motion is one of the most important rudimentary building blocks of the world in which we are in and going deeper into. And time and motion, the very term time and motion came from Taylor. So all those time and motion studies, and I don't know that much about Taylor, but I have to think that he was, if you were to ask any technocrat, including the Musk and Peter Thiel crowd and all of them, they would know exactly who he was. He's definitely a granddaddy of efficiency. And what is Musk doing now? The Department of Government Efficiency. That's time and motion, and that's robotics, and it's how do you eliminate the human component and it's automated is kind of an old-fashioned word, but definitely the algorithms, the artificial intelligence, the
Yeah, I have to, if you
machine
don't mind,
learning of the world that we're in.
I have to mention this as well. And I already sent you a screen grab of this, but I really want to get it onto this broadcast. And this is another book I've been reading, and this is called The Shallows.
Mm.
How the Internet is Changing the Way We Think, Read, and Remember. It's by a gentleman called Nicholas Carr. Interestingly, when I've watched a few videos of Nicholas Carr, on one video only, he's introduced as being the World Economic Forum's head of cloud computing or something or other. But there's no record of that on his Wikipedia page, and nowhere else have I seen that. But this is from when the book came out, 2010. He was on the circuit doing talks, advertising and publicizing the book. So he has some World Economic Forum affiliation. And it's a very interesting book. It's not it leaves a lot out. I'll tell people right up front that this book does not talk about technocracy, cybernetics, ARPANET, or transhumanism. None of
No.
those, or Norbert Wiener. None of those things are in the index, right? So that gives you an idea of what's not talked about.
Someone sent Alan this book when it first came out, and we read it together. And it's definitely, if it mentioned any of those, then you might be looking at a cautionary tale. But it isn't. It what it really is. I thought, yes, he's got a problem. The internet is taking away our ability to think deeply. But I also got a strong sense that there was a lot of, this is a great world that we're going into if we can just address a couple of little problems here and there. So no cautionary tale, no ARPANET, no technocracy, nothing like that. It's just like, let's just, tweak a thing here and tweak a thing there, and it'll be a great world. That was my sense.
Right. Yeah. And I haven't got all the way through yet, but I'm getting that. And actually, I'm such a nerd. I actually put a little pink tab here. This
Ooh,
is
good. I
something I'm
love
going
the
to
color
start doing.
coding.
And because when I got to this page, I felt, and I could, I'm going to read more. I haven't finished a couple of chapters yet, but I felt that here I got the main message of the book, right?
Okay.
Which is ambiguity is not an opening for insight, but a bug to be fixed. The human brain is just an outdated computer that needs a faster processor and a bigger hard drive and better algorithms to steer the course of its thought. Now,
Huh.
he's not saying that like that it's his opinion. He's actually saying this is in the chapter The Church of Google, which is a really good chapter. It tells you a lot about Google. And he's kind of saying this is what these guys in Google think, these crazy people. But I kind of feel like the mess the message I felt like that is really the message
Mhm,
because all the way through he's using machine terminology to describe the human brain.
mhm,
And I do it, and we all I think we will all do it.
mhm,
Like really, this is a message to anyone listening. Watch yourself for saying things like rewiring your brain, or saying I said the other day I was talking about having a circuit in my brain. I was saying, I don't have a circuit that does this. I was trying to describe something that my brain doesn't do, or association, so we're being conditioned very subtly, but very comprehensively to think of our brain in terms of machine language. And that is,
mhm,
I would argue, preparation for transhumanism, for augmentation, for wearables, implants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
mhm,
So that was one of the main, I think, payloads of this book was to get you deeply into this idea of the brain as some sort of machine that can be programmed that has code that runs on circuitry.
mhm.
Um, I could be wrong. I might change the pink tab to another place, but but to go back to why I wanted to mention this page here really stood out to me. This is 150 to 151, and he mentions at the top up here our man Taylor, and he's talking about Google. And he says the goal, as Taylor defined it in his celebrated 1911 treatise, The Principles of Scientific Management, was to identify and adopt for every job the one best method of work and thereby to effect the gradual substitution of science for rule of thumb throughout the mechanic arts. So just a mention of Taylorism and this drive and this push towards efficiency. He says that the religion inside Google is Taylorism. So that
Mhm.
connects us to what Zamyatin is describing about the in the one state. Now, this is the bit that really blew my mind and had me kind of do a whoa kind of moment, just with the synchronicity. He goes on, he talks about this Taylor system of measurement and optimization. And then down here, he talks about Eric Schmidt, the CEO, or I don't know if he still is, but he was then. And he talks about Marissa Mayer. And he says, this is a quote from Marissa Mayer. Let me get that up. We try to be very data driven and quantify everything, says Marissa Mayer. We live in a world of numbers. And it
Mhm.
because I just read Zamyatin and I thought we live in a world of numbers.
Mhm.
And this goes on to talk about ID codes, digital twins, data gathering and collection, and how somewhere there's a database, and in that database we are just a string of digits and numbers and data
Mhm.
points. And this is being used to target us with advertisements, to nudge our behavior, to predict how we're going to react when something is announced in the news or some event occurs. Who knows what simulations are being with all our data input into them to predict what could be happening. We know they like to do computer models, limits to growth. Classic example, the models during the Big C event by Neil Ferguson, another great example. Thoroughly debunked, by the way, in both cases. But we know how they like to model things. Now that they've revealed that they have this amazing, super intelligent processing software called AI, which I always have to do that because it's not intelligence by my definition of intelligence. What simulations are they running? We are numbers. They're starting to push us towards that, towards this, you know? So I just wanted to mention that, get it on the record. It was an amazing bit of
Oh,
synchronicity for me.
absolutely. Yeah, that's excellent. I've got to dig that book out again and have another peek at it. Good. So let's see here. Well, I think we've done a good job of setting up the world, talking about these elements in there. Let's get back into a couple of story details with the characters. This is record 18. Logical labyrinth, wounds and plaster, never again. At some point in the story, I'm not sure if she's introduced here in record 18, but you is introduced. And she is an older woman. She is a teacher. She's seriously past her prime. We can think of her as in her advanced middle ages, but somehow she ends up with a sex ticket for Triangle or D503. And she has a kind of a maternal way of dealing with him, matter of fact, but in spite of the fact that she appears to want to give him a helping hand and help him through his illness, which is all of a sudden he has these feelings, and she's trying to show him, well, let me help you with that. We get a sense that her main thing here is she's just happy to have the ticket with him, this younger man. That's the sense that I got. And I wanted to say something too. I had read about this novel, and I had read that it was kind of one of the most important works of science fiction, or the first important work of science fiction, and that maybe Brave New World, Huxley got a lot of his inspiration from it. Certainly Orwell did. And so I'd read all of these things, but it was only when I was reading it that I realized, in a very circumspect, tame by today's standards, but nonetheless there on almost every page, it's erotic. There's no other way to see it. There is something very erotic in the writing. And I understand, the more I thought about it, I thought, oh, well, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And again, I don't know if this is fighting system, using system, but I wonder if Zamyatin conflates love and sex or eroticism as the path into what makes us tick, almost in a Freudian way. And I ask that question because Zamyatin was never married, I don't think. I'm not sure about that, but I think he just lived the life of an aesthete. And by that, I mean somebody who liked fine wine and dining, and he maybe was sincere in his, turning against Russian Orthodox and getting into Bolshevism, but there's a sense that he just likes the finer things, including the finer music and the finer literature and all of that. What is his experience in a relationship? I don't know. But I have the feeling that he has conflated love and sex in terms of motivation. Nonetheless, 090 still prevails. She's still the winner here via love and maternal instinct. But all through it, the drives that confuse, the drives that spur on, the drives that cause chaos, the drives that that spark the revolution. It's sex. Sex, 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 sex. Now he says, what have we not conquered? Love. But he spends a lot more time. And, granted, there's a symbiosis between the two. Let's face it. But it's just interesting that there's so much eroticism and very little love, I find.
It reminds
And
me
if,
the quote.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It reminds me of just quickly the quote that I already read earlier about the sweet lips,
Mm-hmm.
right, from the second record, where the sweet dust makes your lips go dry, and he puts there, all the women you encounter must have sweet lips, and the men too, of course, in brackets. So it's this kind of this idea that there is eroticism, there's sexual attraction, bubbling, not even bubbling, but it's it's there, but it's everyone's like trying to ignore it, like it's the elephant in the room almost.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also just reminded me this topic of 090 wanting to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of in the very is it in the yeah, in the very first record, the last paragraph. I'll get this up on the book count because it's relevant. Um, when he's decided to write his record to put in the integral to send out to propagandize the aliens, he says in this last bit here, I write this and I feel my cheeks are burning. This is probably similar to what a woman experiences when she senses inside herself for the first time the pulse of a new, still tiny, blind little person. It's me, and at the same time not me. And for long months it will be necessary to nourish it with one's juice, with one's blood, and then to tear it painfully from oneself and lay it at the feet of the one state.
Mm-hmm.
And just that connection there between pregnancy, giving birth, having life within you, but then having it torn painfully and laid at the feet of the one state. Um, yeah, it's very intertwined. It's very connected, and it's I think there's something to the point you're making. In other words,
He describe, and again, there's a lot of humor, and I think some of it was intentional, but in one kind of erotic scene, blue sparks are coming off of I-330, and he describes little buds and the tips of little buds that can be detected through the thin, and it's like this, the dress was yellow and it was very short, and and this was thinner than even anything that he'd seen in the bed. There's so much of that because this really is how I-330 is using him. You talk about how it's a crime punishable by death to poison the body through tobacco and alcohol and so forth. Well, she takes him to the ancient house, and at the ancient house, she's wearing this, short yellow costume and the likes of which he's never seen. So even what he's been exposed to on his sex ticket days, this was wild. Then she smokes, which just shocked him to the point of not even being able to say anything. And she begins to drink some green liqueur, which he realizes is alcohol. And then she gets him to do that. So she's now gotten him to defile his body according to the rules of one state. So, but again, those experiences you might think of as the experiences that uh, is, might nurture a sexual encounter, but not one that is going to be a bonded kind of love thing. Even in Orwell's 1984, when Winston and Julia are in their little love nest, there's still more exchange going on than just sex. It's the whole uh, thing that you might find when you've got somebody that you're really interested in intellectually, emotionally. It's an entire experience. And here, everything that I-330 is doing it's pure seduction. And it's seduction that is aimed at confusion and keeping him slightly off balance, and a reward punishment. Even the way he describes himself as throwing himself at her feet and kissing her knees. This is a man who has been broken, but not necessarily by love, but by lust. She has
Yeah.
opened up something in him, and he is now no longer rational. What rational, logical man throws himself at a woman's feet and kisses her knees, eh? What I mean?
And it's kind of hinted at all the way through because what they keep referring to is how he has these unusually hairy hands. And there's a suggestion that I guess hair's been bred out of
Mhm,
these, and it's a relic of a bygone time when people used to be hairy in the past. And
mhm,
he hates his hands, and it's almost like maybe signing the animalistic side of him that she recognizes can be exploited, that his urges, his lust is going to take over and be his weak spot that she can
mhm,
kind of like manipulate him by
mhm.
with the seduction and all the things you just described. So that could be a sort of symbol of that because he hates them. He's always like hiding them and putting them, trying to get them out of sight. And she notices them, and so that's like a theme that runs throughout. And then on the people that they meet on the outside of the green wall, hairy as well, still
Mhm.
hairy or
Yes,
something.
they
Yeah.
had, he described it. So they, at a certain point in this story, um, I-330 gets him over the green wall. I wasn't sure of the mechanism. There were some things that it didn't matter how many times I looked at it, read it, listened to it. I still didn't quite understand. We go to the ancient house. The ancient house is kind of like a museum of the way it used to be. There's like a Tiffany lamp and some wooden furniture, whereas everything in the city is glass, and there's actual walls in the ancient house, and it's guarded by an old babushka. I love the way he writes her. She's got so many wrinkles. Her mouth has become lost. His words for it are just brilliant. The her face kind of collapsing in on itself from the wrinkles. But ancient house is almost like a museum replica of what barbarians back in the day used to live in. But there are some things going on there that I don't understand the mechanism of, and I'll have to say the wardrobe. And there's a little, is it C.S. Lewis?
Yeah.
Is it
I know
Alice in
which wardrobe.
Wonderland? I'm not sure what's going on, but there's something about that wardrobe that functions as, is it a tunnel that they've managed to tunnel over outside the green wall? Because when he and I-330 have their tryst there, and then he wants to say something. There's no escape from the room, right? There's no other door or window or anything. And he turns, goes back to the room, and she's gone, but he sees the key shaking on the door to the wardrobe. And he looks in there, and it's just, black. There's nothing there. And there's another point when he died. He describes, this was the feeling that he had that he died. Was this not an experience of going inside the wardrobe? That was that was where I thought he was when he said I died. And that whole symbolism of like the sarcophagus, the elite, the skull and bones, the going in something, except unfortunately for our narrator, he doesn't really see the light when he, after his death experience, he's still kind of, a tool for her. But that wardrobe and the going into another world, I don't really get it. I didn't, if you understood it, how they got there. But she ends up taking him beyond the green wall. And beyond the green wall, they see the people. Again, I made the note, well, boy, evolution was moving pretty quickly there because we're what, maybe 400, 500, 600 years future. And yet these people on the other side of the wall have already adapted so that they have what he describes as a smooth, soft fur on them, the men and the women, but the women somehow have hairless faces, hairless breasts, but that they are covered in this fine fur. And this is part of their evolutionary adaptation to being thrust out of the confines of the panopticon glass city and having to make it on their own. They somehow evolved to have fur. That's what I gleaned from it. Or is it a throwback? There's some things that I couldn't quite figure out because she describes. We should get into the revolutionary ideology behind it with entropy versus energy, but she describes herself as Mephi, right?
Oh yeah, of
Yeah. So
course.
he at one point, I think it's record 26, he's comparing Mephi to a rash. The Mephi were everywhere. It was like a rash. And then finally, on my page 159, he talks about what the Mephi were. Let's see if you can catch up. I'm just gonna. So they never explain where the term Mephi comes from, and I just was left to think it was Mephistopheles, right? The
Yeah,
devil, because
right.
she says here. Um, let's see, get to my page 159. Um, I think maybe the next thing to do is go into the record where Zamyatin kind of gives his political ideas here, but she's talking about who she is, who they are, who is the resistance, and they're on the other side of the wall, and they're talking about the people on the other side of the wall. I'm trying to get here. Okay, so but you didn't know, only very few knew that a small part of them managed to survive. So this is after the 200 Years' War. A small part of them managed to survive and went on living there on the other side of the walls. They were naked and went off into the forest. There they learned from the trees, animals, birds, flowers, sun. They grew coats of fur over their bodies. That's what cracked me up. It's like, well, that's some intense evolution. But anyway, they grew coats of fur over their bodies, but beneath the fur, they kept their hot red blood. You had it worse. You grew numbers. You grew numbers all over your body. Numbers crawled about on you like lice. You all have to be stripped naked and driven into the forest. So she's talking about regaining, the old way. You should learn to tremble with fear, with joy, insane rage, cold. You should learn to pray to the fire. And we Mephi. Okay. So again, I'm thinking of the Mephi as a third class here. You've got the people who were driven outside of the walls and they grew fur. And then you've got the numbers inside the wall with numbers crawling on them like lice. And then you've got the Mephi. And the Mephi we want. And then she stopped and he said, no, wait, Mephi, what is Mephi? And she said, Mephi, it's an old name. Mephi is one who, and here's the ellipses again, right? You remember they're on the stone. There was an image of a youth and more ellipses. Or no, I'd better put it in your language so you'll understand it sooner. Look, there are two forces in the world. Now, here we're leading up to if Zamyatin has got a philosophy, a political philosophy that he's putting it across, here it is. Look, there are two forces in the world, entropy and energy. One of them leads to blissful tranquility, to happy equilibrium. The other leads to the disruption of equilibrium, to the torment of perpetual movement. Our, or rather your ancestors, the Christians, worshipped entropy as they worshipped God. But we anti-Christians, and then there's more ellipses, and that's it. So, okay, she is revealing to him that she's another class of people altogether. And she's a Mephi. So she's not a fur covered on the other side of the wall. She is anti-Christian. She is Mephi. Never explained. Well, what could it be? Mephistopheles. It's got to be the Faustian devil. It's got to be.
Mm.
And when I finally equated her and her philosophy and that group with what you would call, well, I called it Trotskyism, permanent revolution. So she's a permanent revolutionary. And there's a great thing in Record 30 where she goes into this. She's an anti-Christian. She's energy, not entropy. And she talks about it, she talks about what does energy, if there's not enough movement, we're going to smash it, we're going to smash that atom. We're going to cause that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That reminds me, so this the connection you just made, I didn't make any of that with Mephi, Mephistopheles. But this story has a lot of references that are like parallels with the biblical story of creation. You've
Mhm.
got, and there's a section where I put a note in, which is 61. I'll just pull it up. I'll show you. So this bit I put paradise of one state.
Mhm.
And they're talking here, and I'm not even sure who it is. Oh, this is, oh, so he's talking to his friend, his poet friend. Um, and I think they're just in his apartment, and his poet friend's talking about the ancient legend about paradise. And he keeps talking about how the pea is a fountain because his friend keeps spitting while he's talking. You see the ancient legend about paradise. I mean, it's about us, about now. Yes, you think carefully. Those two in paradise were presented with a choice, either happiness without freedom or freedom without happiness. No third choice given. They, the blockheads, chose freedom, and so then, of course, for centuries after that, they pined for fetters. For fetters, you see, that's what Weltschmerz is about. For centuries, and only we have realized once again how to return to happiness. The ancient God and we are next to one another at the same table. Yes, we've helped God finally overcome the devil. It was him, wasn't it, that incited men to violate the interdict and to save pernicious freedom. He is the malicious serpent. But we plant our great big boot on his little head and crack. And that's that. Paradise again. And once more we're simple-hearted, innocent like Adam and Eve. None of that muddle about good and evil. Everything's very simple. Paradisiacally, childishly simple. The benefactor, the machine, the cube, the gas bell, the guardians. All that's good, all that's majestic, splendid, noble, exalted, crystal clear. So what the other thing that this is that's tying into this as well is the Guardian, which D503 recognizes throughout the book and always refers to as uh, the shape of the letter, which is S. And S, of course, is a snake. It's a shape that has that appearance to it. And D503 observes that this man is snake-like, like his body suits the letter of his name. And this S character shows up, and he's working with I-330, I think, and because he shows up at key moments and
Uh-huh.
lets the narrator get away with things. And there's moments throughout the book where this happens, where the narrator's expecting a certain reaction or an outcome, and it doesn't happen. The person
Mhm.
actually helps him out or lets him off or doesn't punish him or something, and it's very confusing and disorienting to him. But yeah, that's just another tie in there of this the order with God, the benefactor at the top, with his large, heavy hands that seem humongous to everybody, and his decision to just evaporate, basically evaporate, doesn't he? When they all go to watch a public execution, the machine and the benefactor activates it, and the machine turns them into a puddle of like
Mhm.
purified water. I think it said that's what my copy said. So there's this kind of retelling of this story, the rebel so the green wall becomes kind of an Edenic type of
Mhm.
place where you have to follow the rules, and if you break the rules, boom, you're out, or
Mhm.
you're annihilated. And then you've got Eve being tempted by the snake, and you've got Adam being tempted by Eve. So
Mhm.
there's other parallels here with the biblical story of Genesis as well, and yeah, the Mephi
The
ties
Mephi, I
into it.
guess. I couldn't. I mean, I I didn't see it right away, and then I didn't see it, and then I realized they were never going to explain it to me, so I had to suss it out for myself. And I don't know if that's what he meant or not, but it makes sense to me. So there's see, that was record 26, 28. Okay. So we've introduced the older woman, you, who wants to protect D503, the triangle narrator, from I330. And then we understand I330 explains that she's a Mephi, so she's not obviously not a fur-covered barbarian on the other side. And then we go over to record 30, and that's the final number. And that little piece right there is important. The final number, Galileo's mistake, and wouldn't it be better? And so finally, on my page 168, finally, I330 reveals the revolution and the plan of the resistance to take over the integral. And I thought it was interesting, if you think about what integral means, the complete unit, a whole, the sum. So I'm trying to get to this. All right. So I330 wasted no time. She hit me with everything immediately. I know that you're making the first test flight of the integral day after tomorrow. That's the day we take it over. What? Day after tomorrow? Yes, sit down and don't get excited. We don't have a minute to lose. There were 12 Mephi among the hundreds that the Guardians seized at random yesterday. If we wait 2 or 3 days, they'll be killed. So there was an event, I think that was Day of Unanimity when they had the election that the Guardians seized these Mephi, the resistors. I didn't say anything. She continues. To observe how the test is going, they'll have to send you, electricians, mechanics, doctors, meteorologists, and precisely at 1200 or 12 o'clock. Remember this. When the bell rings for lunch and everyone files into the dining room, we'll stay behind in the corridor, lock them in the dining room, and the integral is ours. You understand? It's got to be this way, no matter what. The integral in our hands. With a weapon like that, we'll finish the whole thing at once, quickly, painlessly. Their arrows will be a joke. The arrows are like, you might think of them as tiny little one-man craft or that kind of thing, like midges against a shrike. And then, if we need to, we can turn the blast from the engines against them and let that do the work. I jumped up. This is unthinkable. It's stupid. Can't you see what you're plotting is revolution? And she said, yes, revolution. Why is that stupid? Stupid because there can't be a revolution. Because this is me talking, not you, our revolution was the final one. And there cannot be any further revolutions of any kind. Everybody knows that. Her brows make a sharp, mocking triangle. My dear, you are a mathematician. You're a philosopher of mathematics. So do this for me. Tell me the final number. The what? I don't understand. What final number? You know, the last one, the top, the absolute biggest. But I330, that's stupid. Since the number of numbers is infinite, how can there be a final one? And how can there be a final revolution? There is no final one. The number of revolutions is infinite. The last one, that's for children. Infinity frightens children, and it's essential that children get a good night's sleep. But what's the point? What's the point of all this? In the name of the benefactor, what point is there if everyone is already happy? She says, let's suppose, okay, good. Let's even suppose that what you say is true. Then what? That's silly. A completely infantile question. Tell something to children. Tell them the whole thing right to the end, and they'll still ask, then what? What comes next? She said, children are the only bold philosophers, and bold philosophers will always be children. So you're right. It's a child's question, just as it should be. Then what? Then nothing. Finished all through the universe, evenly spread everywhere. And she says, aha, evenly everywhere. That is precisely what we're talking about. Entropy, psychological entropy. You're a mathematician. Surely you see that only differences of temperature, only contrasts in degree of heat, only that makes for life. And if throughout the universe all bodies are equally warm or equally cool, you've got to smash them into each other so there'll be fire, explosion, inferno, and we're going to smash them. So she has revealed to us that she is a Trotskyist. She's permanent revolution. And she's also a Mephi that I think of as Mephistopheles.
This links back, and I'm only seeing it now. It's so great to talk about these books in this way, right? Because this links back to their very first meeting where they're walking down the street and he's having he's thinking about pictures he's seen of the old streets, the way they used to be, the way they were in our time, or probably Zamyatin's time when he was writing this. The author's thinking about this, and it's a great quote. So you'll see where this is going in a minute. So he says, I suddenly recalled a picture in a museum, the avenue from back then in the 20th centuries. Stunningly motley, muddled scrum of people, wheels, animals, placards, trees, colors, birds. And they say it really was so. It could have been so. It seemed to me so implausible, so absurd, that I couldn't contain myself and suddenly started roaring with laughter. So he starts laughing, and then there's another laugh by his side, and he turns and he sees the extraordinarily white and sharp teeth, and she starts talking to him. And the first thing that they talk about is how D503 is thinking about how wonderful it is that everybody's the same. And then she points out to him, like, are we all the same? Are we really all the same?
Mm-hmm.
And then he starts noticing differences. And he starts to see that they have different noses and that the shape of I-330 is totally different to the shape of O-90, who's composed wholly of circles with the child's little crease on her arm. And here's S. So S is walking with I-330 the first time they meet. And this is S, Snake, and he's also a guardian. And then he talks about everyone's noses. And then she says, let's see, with a sigh. Okay, so the one to the right, I-330, evidently intercepted my perplexed gaze and with a sigh, yes, alas, we're all different. And he says, in essence, that alas was perfectly appropriate, but again, there was something in her face or in her voice. With what was for me unusual sharpness, I said, there's no alas. Science is growing and it's clear, if not now, then in 50, 100 years, ... Ellipses. I put clones. I think that's what he was going to say here. It's like pretty soon everybody will be identical and then it'll all be perfect. And she says, even everyone's noses. Yes, their noses. He's getting really upset. I was now almost shouting because she's challenging him and pointing out people are different, right? Since there is all the same, what basis is it for envy? Since I have a nose like a button while somebody else, well, your nose may perhaps even be classical, as they used to say in the olden days. But your hands now, no, come on, show me your hands. And this is where he gets embarrassed about his hairy hands and O90 gets jealous. So it's hinted at in their very first interaction, this thing you just pointed out about differences. Isn't it clear to you that only in differences is there life? So it's just a really fantastic foreshadowing to that conversation. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is here on the topic of revolutions, the last revolution, the first revolution, continuous revolutions, just reminded me of another book which has the name Revolution in the title, which is always worth mentioning, which is the first global revolution, the Council of the Club of Rome.
Okay,
And
say
this
it
book
again
is
because I was umming too loud.
so this book is the first global revolution, and it's a report by the Council of the Club of Rome, by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider. This is probably one of the most expensive paperback books you can find to try and buy, right? They're pricing this one up because it has a very infamous quote in it, which is always worth repeating, and it's one of those where it's like I can't believe they actually wrote it down. But it's the common enemy of humanity is man, and this is coming up with the idea that global warming and water shortages and famine and the like would be the new enemy which would unite us. But I just mention it because this book is the first global revolution and it's relevant to their conversation about first implies that there'll be more to come, right? Because usually second follows first and third follows second and on and on and on. So this book, I think, it's not the last global revolution. It's not like we're going to fix the problems and get this all ironed out and good for everybody and then we'll all be golden. It's like this is the first one. How many more are coming and what's going to be next? So very in line with I-330. And then, we haven't mentioned it, but the number 330, 33, it's got a lot of relevance to secret societies and masonry, and the fact that the main character, in your book at least, is a builder, isn't he? Could be something else there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of little hidden clues and symbolism in there. I feel like I'm missing a couple of things here. Okay, so there are just a few story elements that I want to get in here. So the middle-aged woman has gone to D503. She wants to protect him from I-330. There's been a falling out based on jealousy and O90's hurt feelings. She can see now that D503, the builder, has lost the affection that he used to have. They were so tight and always enjoyed each other's company. And now the serpent and the vixen have come into the scene. And she's hurt. And first of all, she writes him a letter and says, this will be the end for us. I know that you don't want to have anything to do with me. You're smitten by this other woman. And so I'm just telling you right now, this is for the best that I have my ticket destroyed and we don't see each other again. So he gets the letter and he goes, yes, it's for the best, So he's completely taken with the vixen. Yes, it's for the best, blah, moving on. Well, O90 shows up at his apartment and in a sad, pathetic, lost way, she tells him again, she loves him. She's the only one in the book who ever says, I love you, has a possessiveness, but also the affection behind it. So she loves him and says, if you will just give me a baby, I will go away and leave you alone. If you'll just give me that. So he launches into her. He just tears her apart mercilessly. He tells her, if I do that, it will be detected immediately and you will die. You will not be able to keep the baby and they will kill you. And she said, I don't care. I just want that feeling, just however brief it is, that I can have the feeling of carrying life. That's what she wants. So it's not explicitly shown or laid out or anything, but he ultimately goes along with this and O90 becomes pregnant. And then the revolutionary plan goes forward and you has managed with her ticket to kind of get in a little bit inside of D503, the narrator's life, his head, what's going on, the illness. I'm not sure, but I think that it was you who gets him to finally go and seek medical attention. And I don't know if you've got it marked off here. I'm trying to think. I don't have a note. Where is it where he goes to get... Oh, I love this. This is record 16. So it's a little bit earlier on in the book that he goes to get medical
I know which bit
attention.
you got. Yeah,
I'm on
that's the bit
page,
I wanted to
yeah.
come back to later. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
But this is an example of the writing between two translations because I had read the Clarence Brown translation and then I was listening to an audiobook. And I'm not sure about yours, but I think that the audiobook that I was listening was based on the Alpen um, translation. So yours might be almost identically translated, but this was a piece, this was a little turn of phrase that was pretty great to me, if I can find it here. Where the doctor looks at him. Is it this page? Okay. Yes. And then I'll circle back around to the the actual scene with the doctor. So there's a he's with the doctor because he's ill, and another doctor comes in, and he's hearing the whole conversation and he weighs on it. And so he's in a daze. He said, I nodded my head in a daze. He looked at me and gave a sharp laugh like a lancet. The other one, that's the other doctor, the other one, hearing this, stamped out of his consulting room on his mile-post legs and tossed me and my thin doctor on the horns of his eyes. Now, if that's not a turn of phrase, I don't know what is. So the other doctor comes in, and his eyes are so sharp that he could toss the two of them on the horns of his eyeballs. That to me was like a genius expression. And this book is full of them. And it's the difference between translations. I don't know if I can find it. Unfortunately, I didn't mark it here, but okay, so here it is. And this is in the Mira Ginsburg book, to her translation. I nodded in confusion. He looked at me with a scalpel sharp laugh. The other heard it, pattered in from his office on his tubby feet. Now, there's a big difference between tubby feet and milepost legs. Let's just start there. Lifted my paper thin doctor, lifted me on his horn eyes. And there's just no way that that has the genius and the beauty of the other. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't read and write and speak Russian, but that that sentence that the other doctor tossed me and my thin doctor on the horns of his eyes. I mean, wow,
Let's have a look
that's
at I'll give you I'll give you my version as well.
okay.
We might as well. Um, I think it's here, right? He burst out laughing, that bit.
It's I think it's the next one over. It's the next page over. We'll come back to that. You've got the Lancet. Oh yeah, no, you're there. You're there.
Is
Sorry.
this Lancet
Continue.
like?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
it.
So I nodded my head in dismay. He looked at me and burst out laughing, sharply, Lancet-like. The other one heard, bollard-leggedly, beat his way over from his surgery. His eyes tossed my slimmest of doctors up on horns and tossed me up too. Yeah, I think I like the first one you read.
And that's good. It's almost as good as the first one, but I mean, again, it would just be great to read the Russian and see, but to get tossed up on the horns of somebody's eyes is
Yeah.
it's genius writing. So if you go back uh to go back to tell us what the doctor said to him, if you want to share that bit. The doctor
Oh yeah.
tells him what's wrong with him because this is pretty great.
This bit ties into the whole conversation around standardizing human beings and getting rid of their humanity. And I read an article on Off Guardian. I shared it in my group yesterday, and it was titled No Human Contact. And it was an article about how automated systems are creeping into our lives everywhere to the point where we are losing contact with other human beings. You pick up the phone, you got to sit listening to a pre-recorded menu for 10, 15 minutes if you have the patience to do that. I often end up just swearing and hanging up because it's so infuriating to be put in that situation. Um, and his argument was saying all this AI, all these chat bots, all this automated automation is is chipping away and eroding our humanity, and we need to preserve it. Go and talk to your neighbors, go and meet people, hang out, have a coffee, find like-minded people, do things in 3D world as much as possible. And it just reminds me of this Taylorism of making people into machines gradually, slowly, stepwise, nudging us to be more machine-like, right? And part of it is, as we already discussed, the curing of imagination. And then there's another very similar episode here, which the post-it for this is incurable soul, but I think that's what he says at the start
Yes.
of the record, isn't it?
Yeah.
Incurable soul.
Yeah.
So he gets sent to the medical, because all the way through the book to this point, he's using, right, he has this encounter with I-330, and he knows that he's obligated to report what's happened, but he doesn't. And then he misses the window. You have to report what's happened within the
Hmm.
first 24 hours or something. He misses the window and he keeps using the excuse, well, I'm ill and I
Yeah.
must be ill. And I know I'm ill because I'm having all these feelings
And dreams,
that
he
don't.
has dreams,
Yeah,
which you don't have
yeah,
dreams in this world.
yeah. Dreams are a sign of illness and sickness as well. And these are happening to him. So he knows he's ill and he uses this illness as an excuse. And he keeps going back and forth around trying to hand wave what he's experiencing, this lust, as an illness, as something that it can be corrected, right? And so he ends up, I forget, I think it was S that brings him here. Um, and because he mentions S for earlier in the chapter, I just spotted it as I was skipping through. But anyway, he ends up here, he's talking to some doctors, and he's saying, why had he brought me here? Why had he spared me? So he's expecting to be vaporized and turned into a pile of clear goo for what he's done so far in the book. It doesn't happen. He gets taken to the doctors, and we find out later that the doctors are working with the Mephi as well, and because they'll write like sick notes to excuse people from doing from their obligations. Um, and then so yeah, this is the bollard-legged doctor, the doctors again, two men. One, short, bollard-legged, was tossing patients up in the air with his eyes, as if on horns, and the other, the slimmest possible, sparkling scissor lips, a blade nose. That one. I threw myself towards him as if to someone dear to me, straight onto the blades, with something about insomnia, dreams, a shadow, a yellow world. The scissor lips sparkled, smiled. Yours is a bad case. You've evidently developed a soul.
Yeah.
A soul? That strange, ancient, long-forgotten word. We sometimes said soulmates, soulfully, soul-destroying, but a soul. Is it very dangerous? I babbled. Incurable, the scissors snapped. But what exactly is the essence of it? Somehow I can't picture it. You see, how can I put it to you? You're a mathematician, aren't you? Yes. Well then, a plane, a surface, this here mirror, say, and you and I are on the surface, there, you see, and we're screwing up our eyes against the sunshine, and there's this blue electric spark in the tube, and there, a glimpse of the shadow on an arrow. Only on the surface, only for a second. But picture this. Some sort of fire has made this impenetrable surface suddenly soften, and nothing slides across it anymore. Everything penetrates inside, there, into that mirror we look into with curiosity as children. Children aren't so silly at all, I assure you. That reminds me of the children being the bold philosophers,
Mhm.
right? Children aren't so silly at all, I assure you. The plane has become a volume, a body, a world, and it's all inside the mirror, inside you, the sun, and the whirlwind from the screw of the arrow, and your own trembling lips, and somebody else's too. And you understand, the cold mirror reflects, throws back, but this absorbs, and there's a trace of everything, forever. One day there's a scarcely noticeable wrinkle on somebody's face, and it's already inside you for good. Once in the quietness you heard a drip fall, and you can hear it now. Yes, yes, precisely. I grabbed him by the arm. I could hear it now from the wash basin tap, drips dropping slowly into the quietness, and I knew it was forever. But all the same, why on earth a soul all of a sudden? It had never been there before. And all of a sudden, why does nobody have one but I? I clutched ever tighter at the slimmest of arms. I was terrified of losing the life belt. Why? And why do we have no feathers, no wings, just shoulder blades alone, the seating for wings? Because wings are no longer necessary. There's the arrow. Wings would only be a hindrance. Wings are for flying, and there's no longer anywhere for us to fly to. We've arrived. We've found everything. Isn't that so? I nodded my head in dismay. So we don't need a soul anymore because the benefactor has built the one state with its green wall around it. And no longer do we need to absorb experiences into our memory banks,
Mhm.
into our memory banks. There's me describing humans as machines again. See, it's so prevalent in our language that it's like infuriates me when I catch myself doing it. But these things that make up our history and who we are as people and the journey and we've been on, the places we've been, the people we've met. We don't need any of that. We just need to be mirrors that reflect what we look at. And that's part of this keeping everybody standardized and the same, acting, behaving, talking the same. So that bit was pretty good.
When the other doctor that came in and tossed them both on the horns of his eyes, he gets angry in the very next scene after doing that. He said, "What's going on? A soul? Did you say a soul? What the hell? Next thing you know, we'll have cholera again. What did I tell you?" He tossed the thin one on his horns. "I told you so. We should operate on all of them, on the imagination. Extirpate the imagination. Surgery's the only answer. Nothing but surgery." That's, he's furious. He's like, why do we mess about with this imagination and the soul and all these problems? They keep cropping up. So that I think just, for time's sake, and I know it's getting late where you are, but I wanted to, and then we can fill in some blanks. I'm just going to go ahead and complete the story here. So
Yep.
what happens is there's a couple of things. 090 shows up a little bit later to see D503, and she's pregnant and she's beyond thrilled. She's got a little bit of a bump. She's so happy. She's in bliss. She doesn't care about anything that's going on. She just wants to feel the baby and, feel her maternal instinct. And she's kind of cooing and being so appreciative of D503 for doing this. And he immediately pops the bubble and says, "They're going to kill you. It's, in a month, this will be obvious. You're dead." So she's completely deflated and she's petulant. And she said, "I don't care. I don't care. Let them kill me. Just that I've been able to experience this is good enough for me." And then she leaves. And so the integral is drawing closer to the test flight date. And the older lady, is kind of worming her way more into his psyche and kind of getting in there under the pretense of, "I'm going to help cure you, and you poor sick thing, and I'll protect you from the vixen." And the plans are, well, before the plans are discovered, for some reason that we don't know, D503, the narrator, has a human moment. He tries to get 090 to get with I330 so that she can help 090 escape over the green wall. And 090 says, "I don't want anything to do with the vixen. I can't believe you would even talk to me about her." And she storms off. But he tries again, and this time successfully. He basically kidnaps little shorter than maternal Norm, and he takes her with a note. And I wasn't sure of the mechanism. Did he put her in the wardrobe at the ancient house? But whatever he does, he directs for I330 to take care of this pregnant woman. And 090 leaves the story because she survives. She actually gets to go and live with the barbarians and have her baby. We don't hear from her again. We don't get the conclusion, but he just feels, he's got that human moment where he feels for her and says, she's pregnant. And was it partly because it was his baby? He never acknowledges, it even says that he's done a good thing by fathering a child. There's none of that. He just says, here's a note. Give this note to her. I'm kidnapping you and making sure that you're okay. And he saves her. So the narrator saves 90, and she is able to be the heroine of the story. Gets to feel her maternal instincts, and she lives happily ever after. She's escaping the panopticon. She will have her baby. Now, the plot to take over the integral is foiled. And everybody is rounded up, and D503, the narrator builder, is taken in front of the benefactor, and the benefactor says, I'm so disappointed in you. I had such great plans for you. Do you not know who you are? You were specially chosen. You're the builder. You're the builder of the integral, and we could have done so much together, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, do you not understand that the only reason why I-330 chose you for her seductions, et cetera, is because you're the builder of the integral. Duh. And he's basically what he's saying. And of course, I mean, this has never crossed, our narrator's mind, because he's completely, he's thrown himself at her feet and kissing her knees. He's lost. He's lost. And that's it. The day of the test flight, the Guardians come on board the ship and they say, the test flight continues, but you, Mephi, are going to be rounded up. We don't know who all you all are right now, but we have a good sense, and we are going to find you. We will ferret you out. You will face the death penalty, and you're not getting the integral, and your plan is over. It's ruined. It's destroyed. And then our poor narrator D503 is, and he ends up telling the benefactor the whole story, and then I-330 just gives him the cold shoulder, and has nothing. No, I should have known, whatever. And D503 is just left to be swearing at you. His words are kill you, the middle-aged lady. That is, that, because he understands, if I didn't tell the benefactor, I mean, I bubbled and blurbled and everything, but I never gave her away. I never confirmed his suspicions. I never told anybody about a plot to take over the integral. Who did? And he finally figures out that it was you. So I-330 is executed. Whoever the other Mephi that they rounded up, done. They're gone. They're turned into the the fluid. They're gone. And D503 is not killed. He is simply lobotomized. He's got his whatever they managed to do to get in there and extirpate the imagination. They've done it with him. And so that's your spoiler. That is the story. But
I think it's worth, if I can, just quoting from the final record.
yeah.
And this is the last one. This is 40th record. And yeah, this is after the what would you call it? The procedure. And then he must have read back what he's written so far, and he says, "Did I, D503, really write these 220 pages? Did I really once feel or imagine that I felt this? The handwriting is mine, but only the handwriting. No raving, no absurd metaphors, no feelings, only facts. Because I'm well. I'm completely, absolutely well. I'm smiling. I can't help but smile. Some sort of splinter has been pulled out of my head, and my head's light and empty. To be more precise, not empty, but there's nothing extraneous preventing me from smiling. The smile is the normal condition of the normal person. The facts are these. That evening, my neighbor, who discovered the infiniteness of the universe, and I, and everyone who was with us, were arrested for not having an operation certificate." And I was thinking about operation certificate and how that
Uh-huh.
ties into something that happened recently when we
Uh-huh.
were all
Uh-huh.
being threatened with needing to go about our business, for not having an operation certificate, and were driven away to the nearest auditorium. The number of the auditorium is for some reason familiar, 112. Here we were bound to tables and subjected to the great operation. And then he carries on, and he just basically ends with the witnessing. I think it's witnessing I-330 being, I think, tortured or else executed. Um, a woman. So he says the woman looks familiar. She was brought here. She was to give her evidence in my presence. She stayed stubbornly silent. I noticed that she had sharp and very white teeth, and that this was beautiful. So that's noticing the teeth again, linking back to the first time when he
And
saw her.
he didn't recognize her. There's no recognition because
No, it's like there's something familiar,
mhm.
but he can't quite put his finger on it. So the bit that I just glossed over was that I should have mentioned is immediately after this, getting the great operation, he presents himself before the benefactor and tells him everything I knew about the enemies of happiness. Why could that have seemed difficult to me before? It's incomprehensible. The only explanation, my former illness, the soul. So he's been cured of his illness,
Yeah.
which is great news. Um, He says, I sat for the first time in the renowned gas room. The woman was brought there. She was to give evidence in my presence. The woman was stubbornly silent and smiling. I noticed that she had sharp and very white teeth, and this was beautiful. She was led under the bell. Her face became very white, and since her eyes are large and dark, this was very beautiful. When they started pumping the air out from under the bell, she threw back her head, half closed her eyes. Her lips were compressed. It reminded me of something. She looked at me, clutching tightly at the arms of the chair, looked until her eyes closed completely. They pulled her out, quickly brought her round with the aid of electrodes, and again sat her under the bell. This was repeated 3 times. So it's some kind of torture, isn't it? Like waterboarding or something, but with suffocation. The others brought there together with this woman proved more honest. Many of them began to talk after the very first time.
Mhm.
Tomorrow they'll all go up the steps of the benefactor's machine. It can't be put off, because in Western districts there's still chaos, bellowing, corpses, wild beasts, and unfortunately, a significant quantity of numbers who've betrayed reason. So the sort of rebellion, the revolution is still ongoing. There's still areas that are like chaotic and out of control. But on the transverse 40th Avenue, it's proved possible to construct a temporary wall of high voltage waves. And I hope we shall prevail. More than that, I'm certain we shall prevail, because reason must prevail. And that reminded me of Alan Watts' often used description of things. It's a must be. So it's kind of harrowing, really.
It
It's got a
is.
sort of one flew over the cuckoo's nest type of vibe to the ending.
Yeah. And also you can see that Orwell had a kind of similar thing because once Winston has gone under his torture and been sold out by Julia, right? But once he's undergone this, how many fingers am I holding up? He's just a shell of a man who sits and stares at and repeats whatever Big Brother's saying. He's just a shell. And it was sad. I mean, the first time through, I had a kind of a sad reaction, but also uh, I when it got to the benefactor telling him, "Don't you understand what she just did?" I'm like, "Well, of course that's what she did." I mean, there's never anything there. See, she never was vulnerable with him. I mean, I guess you could say she's vulnerable to expose a plan or anything like that, but no, no, no. She's never vulnerable. She's never feminine in the way of being submissive or vulnerable or deferential or anything like that. She has simply used the fact that she knows that she has this grip on him because of his attraction to her. And she uses it. And so when you get to the benefactor saying, "Do you not understand why you were chosen?" Because you're the builder of the integral. And then I started thinking about, then that's when I started hearing Alan going, "You can't fight the system by using the system. It just doesn't work. It's got, it's ultimately it's our own individual victory that counts. It's your own. You must decide. You must see for yourself what's at stake, and then you must decide how you are going to fight this. And it's not out there. It's always the internal thing because we're talking about things that are internal, the soul, the imagination, emotions, love, all of those things that make us human, truly human, because what is the opposite of being numbers or an integer in a number system is human. And, I understand what you're saying about, I mean, I've even heard Alan describe us as computers, and his way of saying you need to nourish your mind. What you put in is very important because that contributes to what comes out, much like a computer. And we are certainly studied in that way. But the individual victory is that we are not computers. And oh, this is one thing I must say. When I-330 comes onto the scene and he first sees her, there's a couple of things that drive him to distraction about her. And they are this. X. That's the first thing. He describes like an X on her face and an X between her eyes. And this is it's the mathematician. What is X? It's the unknown quantity. He tells us later that the irrational root and, he just freaks out over things that can't be, squared and dealt with. And she's got that X. It's the unknown that he can't figure out what that is. And then the second thing, the only time that you've got privacy in this panopticon world is when you've got your sex ticket and you lower the blinds. And he describes her, I don't know how it was in your translation, but in mine, he describes her eyes, and he wasn't talking about the eyelids, but he talks about the eyes. Again, we talk about the windows to the soul as having blinds. And so even, so the blinds were down and she had her blinds down. He could not penetrate her. He could not penetrate what was going on in that woman's head. She was the unknown to him. And what it was, again, is what she's using it's the attraction. It's the fact she knows in this numbered, regimented world, nobody's ever seen the likes of me. I can play a concert piano, wear a miniskirt, and I mean, it's just smoke and drink green stuff that makes you a little high. So yeah. So, but 090, she's the human. I love you. She's like a child. And I think the significance of the pudginess and the childlike and, it even made me think if we're talking about the Christian references and, suffer the little children and, have a millstone about you. And what do you have to do to get to the kingdom of heaven, the childlike mind? All of that symbolism seems to be there. She is a childlike mind. She speaks before she thinks. Yeah, her tongue's set at the wrong speed. So,
Yeah, and then that links to the quotes about children being the bold philosophers,
mhm.
and the other one as well, which I forget now off the top of my head, but we just looked at a minute ago. Uh, yeah, that's a new perspective. I hadn't been thinking of 090 in that way, but I'm really happy that we talked and you shared that view because I think you're really on the money with that because there's really there's no there's no heroism in this apart from 090. She's really the only one who shows that human desire to be human, right? And it's kind of similar to Brave New World in that, for example, when he's thinking about the hodgepodge towns of the 20th century and it brings it to fits of laughter, they do the same thing in Brave New World, don't they? They snicker and they kind of cringe at the at words like mother and father and the
Mhm.
idea of biologically reproducing. Um, so this this kind of and then actually another idea is just the childlike, the childishness, of like the baby being the baby Jesus as well, and the sort of angle of Christianity there
Mhm.
of how the real success, the only glimmer of hope in this story is the quiet off, escape under, because like you said, it's not a big deal. It's not a massive plot point. It's kind of one. He's like, oh yeah, and I helped her get out, and then it's back to, what's happening. It's not made a big thing of, but that's the way hope is encaptured in this book. It's own 90s maternal instincts, her wanting D503 to give her a baby. But well, she wanted him to be with her, didn't she
She
really?
did. I
She
mean, she
wanted
loved
a
him.
family.
She was so
She loved him, yeah.
transparent. She,
And
she loved him. And see, she was the revolutionary. She was the ultimate revolutionary. If love is the ultimate revolution, right?
right.
I love you. I don't want anyone else to be with
Mhm.
you. I love you. You're mine. I want your baby. You hurt my feelings. You're not the same. You don't feel the way you always did with me before because this, vixen and her snake entered our garden, so
Yeah,
but
that's it.
she's the winner because it is the willingness to be human that allows, I mean, it's not like she didn't plot her own escape, but ultimately it was I that's how I view her. It was her willingness to love that allowed her. And that may be the only thing that got through to him. See, the vixen just got him, lobotomized. But the only thing that may have gotten through to her was her genuine love. And so he does the right thing by that. And the what was it? I was thinking about the I think I may have just lost my train of thought there, but it doesn't
You're right
matter.
though.
Yeah.
And actually I said that there aren't a lot of heroic acts, but that is D503's heroic act, isn't it? That
Yeah.
I'm gonna because he's already in so deep and he knows that he's sick and that he's risking everything, but he actually does something good in the midst of that.
See,
Um,
I got my train back. Remember when they were, starting up the engine on the integral and they were doing work around it, and some workers got caught up because you know how the engines just sucked them right up in there, right? Did,
yeah, they got 10 of them or something get
yeah, like
blasted.
yes. So basically, 10 workers were sucked into the engine of the integral and just like vaporized. They were destroyed, and they all thought it was funny. D503, and there's a passage. I don't know if you marked it or you can find it. I don't think I marked it, but
Yeah.
it was just a kind of a humorous thing. So he does. There's not a lot of humanity in him, and the fact that
Empathy.
he has a display of humanity for 090 and somehow helps her
Di-
escape.
I got it. I
Okay.
got it. So I did put a note, 10 numbers die testing the
Yes.
integral. Um, so he's going on about at the first go shot. So what magnificent mindfully. Yeah. So yeah, they're testing it. It's this paragraph here. He says, at the first go, there turned out to be about 10 numbers from our dock, standing gaping under the muzzle of the engine. Absolutely nothing remained of them apart from a few tiny bits and soot. I record here with pride that the rhythm of our work didn't falter because of this for a second. Nobody flinched. Both we and our machine tools still continued our rectilinear and circular movement with the same precision as if nothing had happened. 10 numbers. That's scarcely 100 millionth part of the mass of the one state. In practical calculations, it's an infinitesimal of the third order. Only the ancients knew arithmetically illiterate pity. We find it ridiculous.
Mhm.
And that reminds
Mhm.
me actually of another section that I marked up, which is, yeah, this whole bit here about the weight of a gram versus a ton. So he's writing, so this is part of when he's writing to he's talking about rights, in fact. Um, and he says that right, so he's kind of like thinking about what is rights and where do they come from. And the absurd ancients had a crazy idea of what a right is. And then he's reflecting on the one state, saying, so then, if you drip on the idea of a right, even among the ancients, the most adult ones knew the source of a right is might. A right is a function of might. And here are the two pans, a set of scales. On one is a gram, on the other, a ton. On one, I, on the other, we, the one state. Isn't it clear? To assume that I can have rights of some sort in relation to the state, and to assume that a gram can counterbalance a ton is absolutely one and the same. Hence the distribution. To the ton, rights. To the gram, obligations. And the natural path from nothingness to greatness is to forget you are a gram and to feel yourself a millionth part of a ton.
Hmm. Good one. Good one. Wait, you were talking about rights, and it reminded me that in another part of the book, when he wanted to go and confess and say, I'm sick and I did, blah, blah, blah. He said, our only right in one state is the right to be punished.
Yeah,
And we should embrace that right, and we must use that right. There's another thing here. I marked this off on record 12. Um, he said, the highest thing in man is his reason. And what the work of reason comes down to is the continual limitation of infinity, dividing infinity up into convenient, easily digestible portions, differentiation. This is exactly what constitutes the divine beauty of my element, mathematics. So everything is reasonable. Everything has to be brought down into the right size and then put back into the integral, the sum of all of its numbers, all of its equations. Just flipping through to see if there's anything that we can't do without. You already shared that one. I have to show you, I didn't use the document cam, but I want everybody to see that I have pretty colors.
are these the ones you got from Aunt Betty?
They are. They're Aunt Betty's. Good. You listen to that one.
Yeah,
These are
yeah.
Aunt Betty's. I was so stoked about that. They're right here. I'm like, oh, she's got all this stuff that she wants to give me, this crystal. And I mean, honestly, if she really wants me to have something, I wouldn't say no because it's Aunt Betty. But this was the thing that got me.
Fantastic.
She gave me this morning, she gave me these juice glasses. They're great Libby juice glasses from, I don't know, I think of the 1960s. They're cute. They're kind of
Wow.
awkward to drink from. They're kind of tiny and narrow, but I like
Small
it.
portions. Yeah. Yeah, I'm having a flick through and there's not.
Oh, here's another one. This is on record 31. So here is where this is right after the record where we hear about energy versus entropy and everything. And he's happiness. What is it after all? Desires are a torment, aren't they? And he should know because he's been through the mill of her desires with her. And it's clear that happiness is when there are no longer any desires, not even one. I kind of got new agey.
Buddhist
I
type
got
of thing.
yes, exactly. I went to Nirvana on that one.
I was going to say, oh, well, never mind. I don't know if you get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't actually
Well,
highlight that bit. I can't see it. Do you know what's really strange as well? Is reading along my translation when you're reading a quote, and spotting the differences
Yes,
is so
yeah.
interesting.
It,
I've never done this before, like comparing, had the opportunity to compare different
yeah.
translations of the
Well,
same
you
book
said
with
at the
somebody.
start that we should get on the same page with the translations, which was a good idea, but I looked for your translation, and at the time that I went on Amazon or Abe Books or all the different places, I couldn't find that translation, and I had two translations on the bookshelf, and I'm like, well, oh, I had found the one I told you at the college campus. I was
Yeah,
walking up
I remember you
there and they
talking
had
about
the
that.
giveaway. And then I realized, oh, I already had that in a different translation. So I got the Mira Ginsburg up there. And that's what sparked the whole thing some months back. And your idea was a good one, but I also think that we would have missed the lesson of just seeing how different a translation can make something. It's the same
Oh
book
yeah.
essentially. We get it, we get the idea. But it's those little subtle turns of phrase that the writer says. And again, we'll never know unless we're willing to. Even then, though, what did he actually write? It wasn't printed in Russian until 1988. So what did he actually write?
It's a very good point. There was another bit that I did want to mention, which was funny, where he describes how he's on a, I think he's on some public transport or something, and he's got a piece of paper and he's reading, and there's like a guardian behind him reading over his shoulder, and he just describes how like reassuring it is to know that his this guardian is looking after him and caring for him by reading what he's reading over his shoulder at the same time. It's got to be earlier in the book, hasn't it? Uh, that bit did give me a chuckle. Let's see.
Yeah, I
Oh,
like
there's a bit where they talk about how all he invents a new kind of street membrane which record street conversations on every avenue for the Bureau of Guardians. So he talks about audio recordings on every
yeah,
single street,
yeah,
microphones on every street,
yeah.
which is just another angle of the. There's a bit here about being a how he talks about how being original is to violate equality. Being original means somehow standing out from the rest. Consequently, to be original is to violate equality. I can't find a bit about when he's relieved about being spied on, unfortunately. Too many post-it notes. But yeah, I think pretty much covered off everything that I'd noticed and oh, there's a bit here about oh, here we are. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
There's another bit on this page that might be worth looking at too. So this is A503 relieved someone is reading over his shoulder.
Uh,
So he says, this event, insignificant in itself, had a particularly good effect on me, fortified me, I'd say. It's so pleasant to feel someone's vigilant eye lovingly protecting you from the least mistake, from the least false step. This may sound somewhat sentimental. Still, it's the same analogy that occurs to me again. The guardian angels of which the ancients used to dream. How much of what they only dreamt of has materialized in our life? Yeah, and there's
that's
a bit further
good.
down where they talk. He's going talking about how the multiplication table is better than God, and that's quite an interesting comparison that he makes. He's going on about how the answers are predictable and they're known, and how much more superior that is than the ancient God. So he says the ancient God created the ancient, i.e., capable of erring man, and therefore erred himself. The multiplication table is wiser, more absolute than the ancient God. It never, you understand, never errs. And there are none happier than the figures living by the orderly eternal laws of the multiplication table, neither wavering nor straying. There is one truth and one true path, and that truth is 2 times 2, and that true path is 4.
That's great. And that is good. And there it reminds me when you spoke about truth, there was another great quote that I wrote down. Here it is, record 36 near the end. The inevitable sign of the truth is cruelty.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good quote. Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
good one.
All right, I better wrap it up here because I've got a thunderstorm. I'm looking outside. There's a thunderstorm coming, which will break the heat. But I've got one cat that was trapped in there who's furious because the AC guy was here and they're all, so I'm like, all right.
No
Okay, I
problem.
I think we did a great job here. I'm so glad that we did this. I'm out of breath. I had to do some cat wrangling just now, but we had talked about doing another book, and I I don't want to announce that title just yet because you're doing the Joan Vion book still, and I am about to embark on Alan's Waiting for the Miracle. And I don't yet have a sense of how long that's going to take me to, as a group, how long we'll be spending on it. There are 24 interviews in total, but there's so much submaterial, other books. The Joan Vion book that you're doing, which is Prince Charles, the Sustainable Prince, he and Jackie actually talk about in either the first or the second interview, which was such a funny coincidence that you're
Yeah.
doing that. And I'm going to try to this week, now that we finish this, I'm going to try to get caught up and listen to the first four you've done now or
No, no,
five.
I've done two.
Mm,
Because it's a really short book. So I've just
okay.
done two. I tried to do the third, had to abandon that.
Okay.
So I'm redoing the third this Friday.
Oh, all right. Well, I think I might be able to catch up and join you on Friday. I would love that.
Oh,
That would be
lovely.
great. So, and then there's something else that you're doing. I don't know if that's a public thing that you want to, if there's anything that you want to tell people about that you're up to, please do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the other thing I'm doing is I've set up a an online community, and the purpose of this is to help people with screen addiction. And so at the minute, it's free to join. I've got all sorts of resources and things going on in there. We've got a book club in there. We're currently reading through this fantastic book, Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. Um, this is amazing. The secret
Really?
military history of the internet. Trying to get some context around why it is we're all addicted to screens and where
Uh-huh.
this technology came from, who funded it, why it's affecting us in such a way, because I think we can see it all around us that screen addiction is a real problem. And so the community is based around this as a loose topic, but really it's there to understand the problem and give each other tools, tips, strategies, and support in overcoming it and making changes in our own lives towards a healthier relationship. I think of it like there's a master slave relationship going on here with technology, and we want to make sure that we're the ones that are in control and not the other way around.
Mhm.
So there's book club live sessions and the replays are in there. There's a short course that I put together with suggestions of what people can do. And that is my sort of second thing that I'm trying to get up and running. So it's free at the minute. When we hit 100 members, that's when I'm going to put a price on it for the membership. So I think there's about 12 slots. So if anyone out there is interested in what I just described, you can go to the link for that. I guess we can put it in the video. People can
Mhm.
find it
Yeah,
easy. And you might get in if you want to for free. But if
that's
you miss the
great.
window, the price might go up.
Well, that's really good, and I am glad to know that I'm not so far behind on the sustainable prints because from what I've read about Joan Vion, she's been passed away for about a dozen years now, but she did some excellent research on a lot of globalist agendas and organizations, and I think it's going to be a book well worth. But at any rate, Jackie Petru and Alan Watt talked about that book. It was mentioned in the first two, one of either the first or the second interview, and I thought that was just a funny little coincidence there. And so I don't want you suggested a sci-fi title that I've heard about for a while, and I think it's well worth us having a conversation about. But let's keep it a surprise for a while. You've got the edition coming, which a real human soul, which I'm so excited for you. And we'll see how Waiting for the Miracle goes, and then we'll reconvene. You and I can touch bases and see what realistically how long we should give ourselves to do this. And I hope that
Absolutely. And
you all got something out of listening to us discuss this. It's well worth reading. I didn't find it the easiest read, but not because the language was so difficult or anything. Mostly it was having to fill in a few blanks and really think about it, because as much as it had to do with his distaste for totalitarianism and a standardized, uniform society, he left a lot of thinking for us to do ourselves. So I thank you all for watching this and reading and participating. And Nick, I'm really looking forward to hearing about, I've planned to join you on Friday for the Sustainable Prince, and I am looking forward to hearing how everything goes for you. So.
awesome. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this as always, and I'm very excited to find out what the next book is as well, because I'm not quite sure which one it is that you've got in mind, because I've recommended a few. So that's
Oh,
a mystery for
well,
me, and I look forward to finding it out.
all right. Oh, I'll shoot you back a message. I think it's the latest one that you recommended to me, but I'll remind you of it, and
Awesome.
we'll plot that in. We'll schedule it in for down the road. So
Fantastic.
I am not sure what is happening for real history. Well, I don't know. So it'll be a surprise next week. And thank you for tuning in and listening to this or watching it. And I wish you all well. Thank you.
Well, I've got something